Looks like it is 7, isn't it? So Kurt, we be starting soon.
Yep.
It's about time. Okay. It's 7 o'clock. I'm going to open the meeting of the Middleton Plan Commission Tuesday, June 12, 2018 to order. So the first item is the minutes, well, the roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Paulson?
Here.
Hubbard?
Here.
Farrar?
Yeah.
Burdick?
Here.
Murray? Here. Ramsey?
Here.
Reed?
Here.
And present.
Okay. The next item is the minutes, approval of the minutes for 5:22.
Move approval.
Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. So we can go to item number 2, right?
Well, that's a public hearing for 7:05.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's 4 minutes till that.
Okay, so we go to item number 3. This is the concept review for the State Bank of Cross Plains, 8301 University Avenue. Who want to take it?
Well, I can do that. Tim Carey is here. It's concept review.
Okay.
They can explain the rationale and.
Where's my,
Yeah, go ahead.
Open mic.
We're good? Thank you. Hi, I'm Tim Carey, and I am here with Jeremy Fromelt and Kevin Piet from the State Bank of Cross Plains. And we're here to talk about, I'm going to move that back a little. We are here to talk about a new bank building at the corner of Deming Way and Highway 14. And before Jeremy presents the project, I thought just a little bit of history might be helpful, given that there has been some prior discussion on this site. The site that we're talking about is immediately north of the Randan site. Contiguous, adjacent to the Randan site. Over the past several years, 2.5 or 3 almost, the bank and Randan and the city have been in a pretty extensive discussion about how to redevelop that site in the aggregate. The city went so far as to conceptually propose some TIF assistance that would allow Randan to move off that site. Randan then went out and got another property under contract in the town of Springfield to develop a new facility, and that would have freed up that corner for a complete redevelopment. Randan then spent considerable amount of time identifying a contractor to help them build a new agri facility, and they were prepared to proceed down that path, but the costs were so incredibly prohibitive for the new facility that Randan decided to stay where they are. As a result, the bank said, we got to move forward without Randan. We'd love to redevelop the entire site, but that's not feasible anymore. So at this point, the bank is very interested in redeveloping the site, and that is what we're here to propose tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. As Tim said, I'm Jeremy Frommel with Iconica. He kind of gave you a brief layout of the site, but as we know, this is on the corner of 14 and Deming Way. With Randan to the south, their existing bank is here with Mounds off to the west.
And there's currently a shared driveway between you and Mounds.
Yes, there's a shared driveway.
Is that considered a shared driveway?
Yeah, there's an easement there's cross-access easement with that driveway as well. Yep. So on our proposed plan, we'd be taking the bank that is right here now and moving it to the corner. Creating, leaving it, we'll demo the existing building after they're moved into the new one, creating just an open space area in that space. We've got parking to the west of 23 stalls. We've got parking to the east of another 10 for a total of 33 stalls total. We're going to maintain that access that's off of 14. This access off of Deming is down, it's more to the north right now. We're proposing sliding that down and getting it right on the property line of the bank. Traffic could either come off of 14 off of Deming. There's a drive up to the south side of the building. So that's in this area right here. Most of the customers that would come into the bank would come into this parking lot that's to the east and enter on the northwest corner of the site plan.
Where's the existing driveway to the, I call it the Mounds building, but
South. The west, you mean?
No, off of Deming.
It's right there, you have your hand. up.
It's-
Go up just a little bit.
Here, let me flip back to the,
Are you putting yours on the existing one?
so,
There's
right
an
now that
existing-
access is right here off
Right.
of Deming.
And then there's another driveway further south that goes back to those buildings.
Yeah, there's a access to their
Where's that?
back, their
South?
back, Randan's back area, and where they've got loading of their,
That's south of their building.
that's south, yeah, it's right up here, right,
So you couldn't do a shared driveway on the
They need it.
south of your
to
property?
eliminate this one.
Yeah.
No, I think he backs trucks
Okay.
right into that, yep. So we're really maintaining our access along the south property line along here. They'll be still maintaining the same pattern as what we have today.
Okay.
Could enter here and loop around into the drive-up access if you wanted to. We're taking all our storm water, we're shedding it both east and west. That's coming over to a retention area in the north part of the building.
That's where the existing, there's a little, like almost rain garden divot in the
In that
northeast,
now
in
with-
the northeast corner right now, right?
Which that's on the highway property, not on, actually, on the bank's property.
So that's actually down close to the road, right?
Yes. Yep.
So in this case, driveway, do you also share that driveway with the Mounds Agri Service too, or it's only for the Randan and for you?
Yeah, there's an easement in place that shares it with Randan and Mounds.
Okay, okay.
Really both from 14 and Deming.
Before you go off the site plan, it seems a very high proportion of hard surface on the site. How does that help you with all the retention that you need to do?
I'd have to probably take that one back to D'Onofrio. They did all the engineering on it.
What is along the south property line, all the way along? Is it at grade driveway?
This south, from here to Randan is, right now, it's kind of a mix of, there's some asphalt that goes to a certain part, and then it's kind of gravel. He is looking at repaving that entire area as well.
Okay.
There's
so
like, they have their scale on that.
Plan though would be to retain that, the path, the driveway there for
Yes.
particular traffic.
This
Okay.
one all the way through. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And looking at the amount of hard surface, I think there's, on one of the sheets, there's a calculation. I think we actually did reduce a little bit of the total impervious surface over the entire project. So by creating this green space, I think that added a little more.
And you are, current zoning is B3,
Yes.
and this is a permitted use and within the height limitations?
They have, yeah, it is, and they have a conditional use, I think, that goes way back, predates us.
Oh, conditional use, okay. And is the number of parking spaces you're providing what's required by ordinance?
Yeah, I think we were 3 per thousand, so we're right at that.
I mean, that's one way to address David's concern of too much hard surface is,
But it should go to
There's
the
some part-
Water
yeah.
Sources Management Commission in any case, because they should look at it.
Or
so.
staff, it may not need to go to Water Resources if staff can.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do.
Oh,
It
okay.
could be, either way, they'll meet the stormwater requirement.
I guess to talk about the building is a 2-story structure. It's got a basement level as well. We're about 10,500 total square feet. We've got about 14 in the basement, which is basically storage and a break room. The bank is on all of first, and then second is for future, for them to either rent out or maybe move in for them in the future. That's really the building use.
concrete plant.
So what we really want to do is make a strong presence from that Deming and 14 corner. So that's why we put the main entry to the building in that corner, in the northwest corner. So we've got a 2-story glass volume that'll be on the north and east. So that'll really be, the highlight the building, when you're at that intersection. We're using 4 materials. We're using thin veneered stone. We're using brick. We're We're using longboard siding, which is a metal siding that really looks like cedar siding. And we're using ephes up higher to just have a break in all the materials. On the south side of the building, on second floor, we are doing aluminum sunshades. We're wrapping that around to the north. It was more just to break up that mass. North side, we shouldn't need any sunshades, but we want them there for detail and appearance of the building.
You have a lot of information, but it really is just concept still, right?
It is just concept, yep.
And could you just address the height? You are below the 35 feet.
Yeah, we're at, like we're at 34.8, I think is what
Wow.
we're pushing it as close as we can
Oh,
get.
that's great.
And we're also using that, we've got clear story up on second floor, that'll have a light well in there. And to the back side, we've got a little higher parapets. We're hoping to hide all our mechanicals within that, so then we won't have any additional screening in there. All the glass, the aluminum storefront and a bronze frame with clear low E glass. Here was really kind of gives you a little better idea of, I didn't have this in my packet.
Oh,
We did a concept from the corner showing what you could see as Randan in the back and how that elevation is gonna look. So this was really our primary objective, is make a nice, strong statement on that corner for the bank.
Yeah.
So that I'd open up to questions. I can show you the materials as well, or?
Any questions from the,
I like that corner a lot better than, right? That's a good corner. It'll leave kind of a gap between you and Mounds. It kind of feel like a hole.
Yep.
But that's better placement now than a hole on the corner, right? So
Right.
if you didn't have to provide parking, you could do two of those buildings on the parcel.
Maybe you can.
Yeah, let me speak to that. Actually, we think there's a big advantage in leaving that parcel to the west vacant right now. We're going to landscape it pretty heavily, and in the interim, it's going to look quite nice. But it will also become a gateway. When Randan is redeveloped, it will give presence off of Highway 14 versus just a narrow 22-foot wide drive. It'll be a really significant presence up to that site, and I think it will create a way better development on the Randan site by leaving that open. And in the interim, we're going to landscape it heavily.
We really appreciate that, that foresight, because we couldn't require that, but that is really looking ahead, and it really will help that redevelopment when that happens,
Yeah.
whether it's 2 years from now, or 5, or 10, or 20,
Yeah.
yeah.
any other questions? David?
Just a design question or design comment. On the east elevation, the last wall of the right-hand wall of stone, right? You've got that sort of about a 3-foot, I'm guessing,
Yep.
band of stone there, right? When you turn the corner onto the north elevation, it's a very, very thin, very thin wall there. It doesn't look like stone anymore, right? It's giving it away as something that's not really stone. It just clapped this stuff onto the surface. So
Yeah.
I just wonder whether you would consider wide thickening on the left-hand corner, right?
Pushing it that way, or, yep.
Yeah, that corner there. Just sort of thinking about making that band of stone wider so that it looks strong and made of stone, right?
Sure.
Would you have to
Yeah.
lose some
But I
windows?
like the corner idea of saying that's the entrance.
With the flat one, it is hard to, and it really does look thin. I think in perspective, you get much more, because there is that 4-foot depth. I think we've got that at like about 2 foot wide is what we're looking at, and then returning the corner.
Okay.
But we could look at,
Yeah, all right.
we're really trying to mimic this tall, this 2-story volume. We've got the same kind of concept on the other side. It just doesn't stick out as far, but we do have that 2-foot band. So we're kind of trying to balance that.
Okay, any other questions?
Have any comments been offered by Mounds or Randan on the proposal?
Kevin, do you want to
speak to that? Sure.
Short answer is yes.
Concept.
You could have done that without me coming up. My name's Kevin Piet from the State Bank of Cross Plains. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the bank. We've been working on this project, as Tim said, for probably about 3 years, and really worked hard with the city, Randan and Mounds, to beautify that corner as kind of a north gateway to the Greenway area. And that's been in part and parcel to our entire concept the whole time. While plans didn't work out to go that direction, we have found kind of a suitable means. Randan and Mounds have been extremely cooperative in the process. One of the things we've done is communicated well with them regularly, frequently throughout the process to get their feedback on what we were thinking. We just met with Randan within the last couple days. He is extremely cooperative on the entire process and is excited to see some of the development going on. So it's been a very cordial atmosphere with our partners to the west and to the south.
Thank you.
That's good. Any other questions?
Yep, with that
Yeah,
said,
yes,
I'm
please.
going to move approval of the concept for the new building and parking area.
I'll second that.
Okay, now any questions or comments?
What do we got to get for the design review? That's extra to what you've given us now.
Not a lot.
It's concept approval, it's almost
We're
like,
pretty close to, yeah, being, after this, we just kind of finish up our plans and resubmit.
And the signage approval would come
Sign
at
would
the final
come with it.
stage too.
Yes, yes.
but it already meets zoning, so it's not,
Signage
there's
is
not
one.
conditional use or rezoning or anything, so.
I'm glad Abby brought up signage. It might be a little bit large. We'll have to see when they give us the specifications.
And the staff will look at the stormwater requirements and all of that stuff?
D'Onofrio has been working with the city engineering on this project.
So it doesn't need to go to the water sources?
That's a decision staff makes with, looking at the regulations and water resources, so make
Okay.
that determination.
Okay. Okay, any other comments or question? Otherwise, the motion is to approve the concept here. And all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Now, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So it's way past 7:05, so there's a public hearing for the request for conditional use permit for 360 Athletics LLC 8155 for Cynthia Street. So I'm going to open the public hearing. Anybody who wants to speak? Anybody who wants to speak for or against this? Anybody who wants to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing part of this. And we are going to go to the item number 2, request for conditional use permit of 360 Athletics LLC 8155 for Cynthia Street.
Staff recommendation is approval.
So moved.
Need a second?
Second?
Okay.
I just have a question, would there
Yes.
be any advantage in attaching a condition that, they say that their parking stalls are adequate, but just attaching a condition that if city staff determines at a later time that there's inadequate parking, that, I'm not sure where you'd find extra parking, but, I'm mostly convinced with this idea that it's an evening use, right?
Right.
You want to come to the mic and explain it, please? Identify yourself and,
Hi, sorry, I'm short. My name's Holly. I'm the owner of 360 Athletics. My landlord did just put in 10 more parking stalls on the other side, so
Okay.
we have more than what I had in before, so, yeah.
so while she's up there, any other questions? We have talked about this at least a few times in the past, so Wayne, Jennifer?
No, I'm good to go.
Okay, anyone else? Dan, David? Okay, otherwise the motion is to approve the conditional use permit for 360 Athletics. All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Wow, you can go home now.
Oh, thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
So the next one is certified survey map and design review for Goban cars. It's going where the old bus barn used to be for Middleton Cross Plain Area School District, and I did go there and look at it, so.
And I apologize, but there are staff comments, and then I have some planning staff comments. These are engineering staff comments. They were sent to the architect for the project, I think, but not the engineer, the civil engineer. I don't know if you want to hear the presentation first, and then I could make some
Well,
comments.
either way, you like to
It's
go
up to
first?
you, it's up to you.
Okay, let's look at the presentation.
These are the
right?
engineering staff comments.
Engineering staff comments, and then I have some planning staff comments.
Okay, so you guys go ahead and identify yourself and make the presentation, and then we will hear from Eileen.
All right, good evening. I'm Josh Wilcox with GBA. We're the architectural firm working on the project. Also here tonight, we have Wade Weiser from Weiser Engineering and Mr. Gobin himself. So, just kind of want to give a big overview here of the project. We are here for CSM this evening and also for design review. And overall, we're looking for conditional approval. Obviously, these design review comments are coming in live as we hear them tonight, so we will see what we can do to address as many of the questions as we can. Don't really have any pointed agenda up here to say other than we can certainly walk through the design if you want to get into those kind of details, and if we want to talk about the land division, utilities, any of the stormwater items, potential easements, things like that. We can get into those details as well, but for the most part, we feel like it's a pretty straightforward project. The architecture itself is pretty simple. It's very similar to what is built on the east side of Madison at the other location. So high-quality materials. It's set back a little bit from the street and will be complementary to the surrounding buildings. So with that, you got anything to add?
No, hi, I'm Don Gobin. I appreciate being in business in Middleton since a long time ago now. And the reason we're doing this is we just need more room, that we've outgrown the facility that we're at. And we were trying to buy this property actually 2 years ago from Lee Bruce, and he had a different kind of deal working on it than he has today, where that was included if that deal went together, and it didn't. And he called me up and was finally interested in selling it. We put the deal together, and I think we've got a plan here that really works. We actually had more display parking than in the original plan, but we brought it down to meet all the landscape guidelines. And Josh here, I went to a Middleton architect because he, does a lot of projects here and knows what Middleton wants and likes to see. So that's kind of why Josh is involved in this.
So you are going to keep both the facility, the old one and new one, or?
Yeah, 'cause
Perhaps. Well, the way we're going to do it is this is going to be our main facility. The old facility we might use for just extra reconditioning and storing like the trade-ins to get off the lot and any excess inventory, that's not ready for sale.
Okay. So this is much larger than the other facility, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
So the reason it's a CSM is you're taking basically the parking lot of the Dogtopia.
Correct, yeah. The corner lot in front of it, and right now it's at a lower grade level, and we plan on bringing it up to the exact same grade level as what the other site is at, because right now it kind of sits like it's in a hole,
Oh, yeah.
And we're not going to use on that side road, there was access driveway into it. That's going to be closed, and we're adding parking stalls for the daycare so they meet their parking requirements as well, because that had to be worked out as well.
So,
I verified
Yeah,
the
go
setbacks,
ahead.
but I didn't verify the parking for Dogtopia. I just want to make sure they had enough parking. I didn't have that information. but-
We put that in the plan there and worked with the seller as well on what they need and what's there, and on these plans, it works for the daycare and works for us if it works for you guys,
And yeah, I just didn't have a chance to see if it was met the requirements.
It's up to requirement.
Okay,
The architects made sure that it should be up to requirement unless we made some sort of mistake.
So, can I ask Eileen, we do have an adopted Parmenter Street neighborhood plan?
we do, I don't think.
Can
that-
you,
yeah.
is this included in that? And do you know what it shows? Because I remember we had the same issue, because we just had traced in the large parcel in the south. And so one of the questions that came up with Trasta was the idea of reducing the size of that kind of super block with right?
Yeah.
The north-south road that we had a lot of a lot of discussion with Trista, and
Yep.
I'm,
And that's why you'll see on my comments, and again, I apologize that you're getting some late. It was a really tough week last week for the planning department.
That's okay.
The last bullet
there are
on
potential
mine
future.
is, yeah, a potential future east-west, because we have Trista going through, and,
Trista's going north, and then they're
and then-
cutting west
Right. and
along the south end
they
of
have-
this property.
Right,
But-
and neighbors
but-
are 51 feet.
But that was a,
Concession.
right, it turned east because we couldn't
West.
get it going through.
Right.
Right, now we
Right.
have the opportunity for it to go through.
Except that this is zoned B3 and it's a permitted use, so I don't know, maybe you could as part of the, but
We looked at that every which way, and it would be a problem for our business if there was a road going through there, is the problem for us. And not that I wouldn't want to accommodate what's going on there, but it's kind of one of those things where both these projects are kind of going together at the same time. But for us to have a road through there, it would be very, very,
Devastating.
we kind of compromised with that idea with Trista, not only because we didn't have that involved, but also because our engineers weren't super excited about another street going out at Laura Lane on Century, between Laura Lane and
Right.
Parmenter. They weren't sure
But
that
essentially,
they
we're
could-
saying the concept plan, or the neighborhood plan, we're just throwing away.
Well, that wasn't in the adopted Parmenter plan. That was in plans that we had prepared with our TIF group. And I don't, well, maybe we did end up adopting it, did we?
We did,
Okay.
yeah. I can't get on the G drive here.
Okay.
Or else I would pull it up.
Because again, the idea is to break up that block and kind of create a connection. Although I'm sympathetic to the idea of not adding another access road off of Airport Road. I guess it's Century on that side, but,
Yeah, it's Century on that side.
Tell
mean,
me,
it's
did you
certainly
have did you
other-
have the plan for Tresta? This is going to come up time and time again tonight, showing the context of your building in relation to things that are going around it. We have a wonderful drawing of your site, blinkers on, to hell with anything on either side of it or across the road.
at the time we bought the property, made the deal with Lee Bruce, it was not determined, he had a deal working on that as well, but it wasn't determined like.
Fine, but it is now.
Correct.
We have approved plan for the development south of you. And no drawing, if you look at the photograph that you've sent us, the aerial that you've sent us, it's still baseball diamond. Well, we know it's probably not going to be baseball diamond, softball diamond, whatever it is.
Correct. I didn't realize my property, my project was involved in their project. I just don't,
It's not, but your neighbors,
correct.
no? And as I say, this is going to come up about 4 times tonight. Putting blinkers on tightly and never looking beyond the site boundaries and saying, I need to respond to that in some kind of way.
Well,
I think that's our procedural requirements, that it doesn't mandate that in a site plan submission.
I think
Right?
it does, actually. We actually do say, show,
Show in the regional context.
Context of.
yeah, show context. I don't have it in front of me, but I think we say that, but.
You can look it up if you want.
I mean,
I might, if I may, I might speak to this. Wade Wise, Wiser Engineering. We've been fortunate enough to work on the Tracer project tonight here with Don, as well as Jacob Klein's 2 projects south of Lisa Lane. So in the context of, have you pieced all these sites together? Certainly in our computer files, we have that pieced together and have been cognizant of all the comments that have been brought up in those projects, as well as your concern tonight in the discussion relative to that public street. So I think, from an engineering perspective, site planning perspective, that effort has been done. To what level does that need to be presented or provided to the commission? Maybe something that we could further discuss, but certainly it's in the context of taking a look at those we have. Since the conception of Jacob's project and the discussion of this public street, we've always had an issue with stormwater management. In creating that public street out here, stormwater is a big deal, and it's a challenge in the site designs of each of these individual projects. Implementing a public right-of-way is going to create its own unique set of challenges. So I think our challenge back to the commission and city staff is, if that public street was to be a reality someday,
there's a comprehensive look at stormwater for that needs to be done as well. And we can only plan for each individual site as it comes along on board.
Can you tell me where it occurs? Where is that road? If it came through, where is it?
Well, I can speak to, in the Klein property was talked about being, it was lined up or planned for in the same location as that north-south private drive in the Tracer project. So
So it goes straight.
Yeah,
Straight north-south.
I understand that, but where does that fall on your plan?
it would fall east of the building. I don't have a graphic here to show it.
Would it be at the boundary, or would it be, where would it be in the property?
Actually,
Probably cut through the building.
just up there.
Right, here's where they were looking, right there, and then right through here, right, kind of like right through there, in line with that driveway there.
And that's not your property. Which is your property?
This is our property right here.
To this line, right?
Correct, this
So
line.
the, so the road goes to the west of that line.
But
The
my,
road would come
my
right
understanding,
through here. Yes,
Yes.
correct, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
to bring it back to Tracer, my understanding was
Right through here.
while we would have liked to have planned the whole block en masse, we recognize the fact that those two existing auto dealerships are unlikely to move, and then, given engineering concerns about creating a additional access point off Century, we kind of vacated, felt like, to me, like we vacated the idea of North-South Street completely, all the way up to Century. And in some ways, we're kind of, I mean, this is the problem, right? We'd like a comprehensive neighborhood plan, but the parcels come to us piece by piece for development, and we have to take them as they come.
Right.
I did run this past the engineer. He said that the Northwest Middleton traffic study, which we did in 2014, that was commissioned by the city, indicated in the near term, Laura Lane and Tribeca Drive should each have 2 approach lanes to Century Avenue, a shared through left and a right only. We have pavement in place to accommodate that need. In the longer term, following installation of traffic signal control, the study recommendation is for the intersection to include eastbound Century approach, dual left turn lanes, 2 through lanes and exclusive right turn, westbound Century, exclusive left turn lane, 2 through lanes and exclusive right turn lane, northbound Laura approach, dual left turn lanes and a shared through right turn lane, southbound Tribeca approach, exclusive left turn lane, a through lane and an exclusive right turn lane.
There.
But he also said that we don't know if those recommendations are still valid. The Tracesta traffic study is still being completed, and that might impact it. But some things have lessened as well. Tribeca, that development is changing in its character, and it's going to be a lot less intense in terms of the traffic generated.
Just to add some more background info, to answer David Reed's question, Abby drew what approximates where the private street would be running from Meadow Ridge and Oak Ridge on the south through the Tracesta property due north. And then if you see where it ends up across the future Gobin site, it looks like, to me, like just to the east of the orange line would be about a row of parked cars. So if you go back to that site plan out the park.
That's the line.
No, right. So then that would be approximately where the 3 medians, or maybe slightly east of that, would be, roughly the curb cuts, like he said. So that would be where that road would be, or that private drive, whatever you call it.
So it's not cutting through the proposed building?
Well, let me
Right on the
clarify
right
that.
on the
It's a car dealership,
boundary
so,
Right, and
you know, you got to think of the site as the building. It's not like,
Right.
a typical brick and mortar business, the
Use is
operations
the
occur.
lot.
Yes,
Building,
correct.
yeah.
So just to make sure that's clear. thought is
Just
clear.
to have traffic going through a car dealership like that with customers out there, I've never heard of a
Well, it
situation.
would be a separate street with, I mean, if it was on the east end of your parcel, it would be a separate street with curb and gutter and probably sidewalk.
Right, but it
It
would
would take up some of your,
take enough to where it would make it a financial non-workable situation though, And the part I'm confused with, because there's access to that building from, what's the name of that road right there? I always forget the name of it. Laura Lane, and then out to Parmenter. I mean, that would be the safest direction for traffic, I would think, because there's not a lot of traffic on those roads at all now. So that's where I'm kind of confused. The more intersections you have, the more danger you have of stuff going wrong. And if I lived back there, I'd probably go to that way and around or Laura Lane, I can't pronounce the name all the time, but the road there with the doggy daycare. I feel like the access is there. I don't know about what you guys think. That's just looking at the area right now. There's not a ton of traffic to need another access back in, even with that new develop, because there's hardly any now, and we have the new development. I'm not a traffic study person either, though, so I'm looking at it from driving around a lot and being in the area a lot, but that's right. I didn't even suspect there would want to be a road through there, with another intersection.
Well, I'm wondering, since this is, going to be not a very long road, it will just have Jacob, Trista, and if this, so it doesn't have to be 60 or 66 feet wide. So it could be much narrower for it to work, right? Could be like something like in Middleton Hills. If we
28
really
feet.
want it to be workable.
You mean like
50 foot right of way, maybe?
Yeah.
28 feet, so you've got 2 lanes of 14 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember my engineering manual control, right? It's, right? Right? That would be the minimum you could do is 28 for no parking, just 2 travel lanes.
I mean, if we think we really want it and it would really help, that's probably the minimum.
Would it be the responsibility of them, because TriStar is private at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
they would put it in, but they'd also be responsible for,
Well,
how do you make that half private, half not?
Right, and it's not currently shown on our official map, right?
No.
So requiring dedication of a street that doesn't exist on the official map is not something we can do,
And I
right?
just- And I also want to point out, concern that the city engineer said he thought we would be okay on Tribeca and Laura, but he said a bigger concern would be that currently the Northwest Middleton study recommendation would require significant widening of Century Avenue. That would likely require right-of-way, but he and I talked about it too. We don't have that on our official
No way.
map. It hasn't been determined. We just wanted to mention it, that we might in the future need to buy some additional right-of-way along there, but we don't have, it's not determined yet. But he said, because again, things are in flux with the different uses and the changes, but the 2014 study indicated that there could be some substantial widening of it, so.
Okay.
I would strongly oppose any widening of
I
an
know-
already
I know
pretty
what you mean.
wide street.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Mm.
But that's his.
And perhaps from the freeway to Parmenter, it should be more of a city street rather than a highway, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, which,
So
We should
perhaps it
narrow that
doesn't,
street.
it doesn't need to be wide.
Narrow it, yeah.
We
No,
should
I
narrow
understand.
it.
I understand.
Should narrow it.
I just told him I would bring that up in case,
And
I know
then-
what you mean.
Then also, just going on with this notion of having adjacent buildings, there is a high-quality prestige building going to the west of this site, isn't there?
oh, that.
Meritor?
the Meritor?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're saying a car lot in the middle of all this is okay.
Fortunately, it's a permitted use and it's B3, and we have no way to say.
And we have, the surrounding uses are all
Car
car
lots.
lots, so it's
And I looked-
temporary ground cover,
I looked at our
right?
application, what we require.
It's auto row.
I know, you already.
It's
own
kind of like in the car business, they call it like auto row,
Yeah.
because they're all
Yeah,
there.
it's right across there, so.
And we do require contour strips in a minimum of 20 feet. We do require adjacent driveways, but we don't ask for that. We should change our application form to say buildings, adjacent buildings, in
But-
context.
I
But
guess the
how
other
about-
question then is the buffering on the south side of an auto dealer with some multifamily residential.
And that's part of my comments, and I don't know if you want to go through these.
Yeah, okay, so I just about got one more question. Like the Trista is leaving some property behind their property for having the east-west road. So,
For only half of it, right?
yeah, they were giving half, and they were expecting the other properties to give half.
They were actually giving 51.
Yeah.
51 feet.
About a third.
Yeah, so the other property has to have a 15 or?
15, that's what.
Yeah, so that would be part of this property?
Well,
too, then?
again, we don't, because they're not asking for a rezoning, we can check with our attorney. I'm sorry, I did not have time to ask that question.
So, but if we want to do that, we would have to do that now, right?
Well, yeah, we could ask our attorney if we have that right. I don't know if we do or not, but I brought it up because it was something that we talked about Traced with. You know, this is a permitted use in a B3 district.
Yep.
It appears to meet the minimum requirements for setbacks and height. I think the landscaping needs to be beefed up considerably. I think there needs to be more room for landscaping. I tried to scale it, and I saw like somewhere between 5 and 7 maybe, and I feel like the whole perimeter, we need that a little bit more landscaping. And especially the proposed display car areas, I think. The lighting levels probably need adjustment. I have to get my magnifying glass out to read the levels, but I think they're maybe too high, especially at the lot lines. I just said we need additional information or verification. I know Wade's been working with the city staff and the architect has, but stormwater management, location of the proposed bike racks, which I think are mentioned, but I'm not positive where they.
Bike racks at a car dealership?
We have them. We have them.
Okay, I know you, but I just.
We have them our east side location too.
Yeah.
They've never been used, but they're there.
Somebody could ride their bike to.
Ride the bike to go buy a car.
Yeah, that don't happen much, but I understand that it's
Go.
something
Their
that needs to be there.
Material and colors and additional detail on proposed retaining walls. Color and other details of proposed concrete car displays, lighting levels. Proposed signage not approved right now, pending review by staff and plan commission. The question is also, should we require a sidewalk for their portion of Laura Lane? It would just be a small portion, but that would get it in for, you know, future improvements too.
Well, and actually, we recently had our TIF consultant do a drawing that showed sidewalk along the entire east side of Laura Lane, and then also a streetscape plan for all of Lisa Lane.
We should.
So I think we should require sidewalks.
And then, you know, again, we talked about the potential for possibly needing additional right-of-way, although I understand the need not to. And then the issue of the east-west road coming from Traced heading west. Those were my comments.
Okay, so.
I mean, I think in general, the use fits what's around it, and you've been a long-standing business in Middleton, and so, I mean, the difficulty is, of course, what we're anticipating south of the site is changing from a more kind of industrial use to a more kind of mixed-use residential transition. I mean, in the same way that, you know, that parking lot right at the corner of Parmenter, and we'd love to.
Right.
But, you know, our long-term plan for the region you can't sit around and wait for 20 years for that to materialize. So you have a right to kind of zoning in place at the time.
Yeah, and keep in mind, it's not like we want to make everything work for all ends of it. It's just, I know with our business, it's really tough to do these sites and make everything work. And unfortunately for us, the display is the key part to it, you know what I mean, that makes it where the business works. And that's really why we're doing it, for the more space. And unfortunately, as you know, it's a very expensive site. I mean, it's a very expensive site. And even when we build a building, it's going to be a very expensive site. So the display cars and everything, you know, like even with the landscape issue, I don't mind putting more trees, stuff like that. The more green space where it takes up spots is where it's a problem for us, because there's just a certain amount of cars we're going to have to sell to do this. Like even on our east side location, you know, we sell between 130 and 150 cars a month. And, you know, it's always still kind of tight, because that project was very much like this project. It was very nice building, very nice piece of property. Everything was done to modern standards. And so that's why, you know, and really, like, even my architects, the landscaping plan that is in place, just so you know, like, we actually gave up more spots than we wanted to just to fit so we can meet Middleton's criteria. It's just that that's the biggest thing. And biggest thing is what I look at there now, it's been an eyesore for years, you know, and I think the whole area will come up with the project behind it and everything going on. I think Middleton, as you guys know, is just looking more beautiful with every project that I've seen done in every little area of it. So, you know, we want to be a part of that, and we want to make it look right, and we're going to use block building, not a steel building. We're going to use good materials. Even the inside is going to be done even nicer than my east side location, because I'm I hate to say this, but Middleton customers and everything kind of like a nicer facility than we do over here on the east side.
Thank you, that's good.
And that's just the truth.
I have a question.
Yeah. The
Yes,
land's really
ma'am.
expensive.
On the edge of the plan, on your landscaping plan, where the asphalt meets the turf, is it a curb and gutter up to the grass? Is that how that's
You're into the
designed?
rear of the property. Can I come over by you so you can show me what you're looking at?
Anywhere around the edge of the property where your asphalt driveway is hitting.
It is going to be curb and gutter, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then its turf is all grass, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question related to stormwater. It appears that all this stormwater is being directed towards the wet detention basin, is that correct? And then the outfall from there goes west into, is that a ditch or a swale or something there?
So you are correct, the majority of the stormwater conveyance for the lot does get to the wet detention basin. There is a small portion of the site that goes northeast into Airport or Sentry.
Yep.
So the existing watersheds are really matching the proposed. We're holding that. On the south side of the Dogtopia lot, there is a stormwater easement that conveys the wet detention basin to the storm sewer system that actually runs parallel to Laurel Lane in the terrace area east of Laurel Lane.
Yeah.
And southerly then.
Okay.
And that existing ditch or swale is intended to be maintained?
Yeah, it's actually a storm sewer pipe itself, so.
Oh,
Yep.
it looked like there was, I thought it was
What is it,
an
discharge?
outfall.
Eventually, I'm sorry, the easement is a swale.
Yes.
The collection of it is a storm sewer right before it gets to
Ah,
Laurel Lane.
Okay, I see what you mean now.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, any other?
And it's definitely better than the vacant former bus storage thing that's sitting there now.
Used by Metro.
Yeah, I was there, it doesn't look all that good.
Do you want us to work with the applicant on the
They still use it?
issues, the outstanding issues?
Yes, I think that would be the.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay.
So, all right, so more questions? Or is there a motion now to, this is the approval of certified survey map and design review and work with the staff?
Sorry.
Eileen, what are
Say
you
that again?
recommending as a motion?
We did-
That you direct staff to work with the applicant on the outstanding issues, including landscaping and the road and.
But still providing design approval.
Um,
Or, no,
Or maybe if it's okay, with the applicant in terms of working toward that at the
Yeah.
next meeting, maybe we can.
So
have a
work with
meeting
the staff so that it can be approved at the next meeting then?
So we can
Yeah,
address the
that'd be,
issues.
that'd be okay.
No, I'll move withholding approval and directing staff to work with the applicant to resolve the identified issues.
Okay? All right, now the questions. Okay, so what, then motion is to, that these guys to work with the staff
To defer
to
until-
address the outstanding issues, and then it will be, come to the plan commission at the next
Then
meeting.
we could have it at the next meeting, the
Yes.
26th.
Yes.
2 weeks.
when would you break ground? Or?
We're looking at, what do you think? Probably late fall, yeah.
So
Yeah.
this timing-wise
So,
works.
so it will be okay then, right?
Yeah, we've been trying to do everything ahead of time, so everything's not last minute, you know what I mean? So,
And I know you've been working on it, and I apologize that you submitted it on time, we just had not had a chance to review it, and so.
we see everything going up in Middleton around here, so,
There's a lot going on.
yeah.
Do you
I'm
control the
surprised-
site already, or not?
What's that?
Do you control the site, or?
I have it, we own it on a purchase agreement. The only reason it hasn't closed yet is because Metro Bus has a lease with Lee Bruce that ends, what's the date that? August that
Okay,
ends.
yeah,
So,
I thought they were still using it, but, yeah.
yeah, Metro Bus is still using it, and that lease is up in August, so we just couldn't close till then. But everything's all set to go, and there's no contingencies on the project or anything like that.
So the timing would work out. So work with the staff and, get it ready for the next meeting. So all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. So work with the staff and get these things done, so.
Thank you very much. I really
All right.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are on to item number 5, certified survey map and concept review for the Parliamentary Place MIG Commercial Real Estate LLC and Dusler Properties LLC, and set a public hearing request for rezoning from Highway Business District B3 to Planned Development District.
And this is being, the rezoning is requested because of the height, because they are gonna go, I think to 50 feet maybe,
Yeah, close to 50.
which it was too great of a dimensional standard for the planning commission to review, and otherwise it would have been a zoning, or ZBA. And they also have a vestibule in the back that,
So it's B3 right now,
Yes.
and it would be a request to rezone to PDD.
yes.
And, okay. What is Parmenter Place, or is that the name of this?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
name of it.
Because one of the things I was reading made it sound like it's, the existing stuff is called Parmenter Place,
Yeah.
but
No,
that's
and
Parmenter Center.
Yep,
Or
Parmenter
Parmenter
Circle,
Circle,
Parmenter
Parmenter,
Center.
yeah.
Everything
Okay.
Parmenter.
It's
Okay.
a continuing concept. And I can go through a quick overview of the project.
Go ahead.
So I'm Matt Schreiner from Vierbecker Associates here tonight representing MIG Commercial Real Estate and Dusler Properties for the three-story office building being proposed called Parmenter Place at 3001, 3003, and 3101 Parmenter Street. So this is the old Colonial Motel site. Tonight, we're requesting approval of the CSM for the project, feedback from you, and approval of the concept plan that's in your packet, and then also, as Eileen mentioned, to set a public hearing for a rezone.
The applicant will be seeking TIF funds too, but has not yet submitted that, so
Is
we
this
don't know
TID
about-
5?
Yeah, so we will be submitting a TIF application, design review, GIP, SIP documents for the project. So as Eileen mentioned, this property is currently zoned B3. We don't comply with the height requirement. Right now, the building is planned to have a 15-foot floor-to-floor height for first floor, second would be 14, and third would be 14 as well. So the top of the building will be about 44 feet, which doesn't comply with B3. The max is 35 feet. The mechanical enclosure will be a little higher than that, but recessed into the building. So that's one reason we don't comply with B3. The other is the overhang for the rear of the building. There's like a 5-foot overhang over the rear entrance. And the building is currently 33 feet from the rear property line. The minimum required setback in B3 is 30 feet. So the primary building complies, but the overhang doesn't. So again, the recommendation was to rezone the property from B3 to PDD.
But the use of office is B3.
Right, and there, I think is there one other use within the building, or retail,
I don't-
potential small?
Potential, yeah, I'm not sure. We'll bring that forward if that does develop. So that's the reason why we're asking for the rezone. The CSM in front of you tonight is basically to combine the three parcels in order to facilitate development of the property for the office building and associated parking. And then getting into just the site itself right now, as I mentioned, this is the old Colonial Motel site. To the south is a one-story office building, a commercial building. Lucigen to the east are apartments, and then to the north is a retail building, a liquor store. And so access to this site right now, as we're proposing it, will use 2 of the existing 3 driveways. So we'll be eliminating 1 driveway, at least that's what we're proposing right now. The 2 driveways that will remain aren't moving. We're going to utilize the existing position of those drives as they line up with median cuts in Parmenter Street. And I think at this point, instead of going into a lot of detail on the design, it may be more appropriate just to answer any specific questions that you have. And I appreciate any comments you have on the concept plan.
So you have been communicating with your neighbors, right? I think you were talking,
Yes. Mig and Dusler have been communicating with the neighbors. They own or work with Lucigen to the south and have been, I believe, talking to the neighbor to the north.
And the apartments to the east?
Yes.
I mean, there's a whole row of trees back there anyway, right?
Yeah, and I don't know how much communication they've had, but they plan to work.
Those aren't apartments, those are condos, right?
I think there's both back there, I'm not sure exactly which is.
okay, the questions.
Abby, can we have a site plan, Abby, please? Of aerial photo?
Aerial photo, existing?
That's popular.
I guess my first thought when I saw the site plan was, I realize this is swimming upstream to what's existing on Parmenter Street. But it's another use that is gonna be surface parking in the front and the building set back from the street. And I don't know what our design plan for that whole corridor is, but a lot of the existing
It
uses.
doesn't make it urban, does it?
It doesn't make it urban, it's kind of that drivable suburban again with a lot of, I realize a lot of what's there is already 1 or 2 stories with surface parking, setback from the street. And I don't know if we have a plan to, once we approve a new development like this, it's a high-quality building, don't get me wrong. We're kind of locking in place that that's the kind of drivable suburban aesthetic of the corridor. It's an improvement from the Colonial Motel and from the vacant Colonial Motel. We can all agree on that.
That will be anything would be improvement,
The Parmenter Center, that's also kind of set back, and Lucigen is, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know what the long-term vision for that corridor is.
We approved the extension of that parking space in front of Lucigen, didn't we? So that it is this same kind of double-loaded parking street.
And there is,
Does your parking street link through to the Lucigen property?
yes, it does.
That's
That's
an
right there.
intended link.
Yes, it is intended to link to Lucigen. And there's a thought that if Lucigen were to expand in the future, that they could work with MIG and Dusler Properties to work out agreements for parking. So they wouldn't have to add parking, they could share parking.
Right. How many parking?
You understand my previous question, right, and why it applies to you?
Sure.
What happens at the sides of it, and who knows, right? Here's another building, blinkers on. Let's get my building approved, and that's all that matters. And things around it that make a difference.
Sure.
Right. If you pull up the aerial, you can see,
Yeah.
particularly these residential units here. Now, that's helpful to see that the residential units are on the east side of the parcel, and behind it is parking. So you're not going to have an office that's that close to residential. Actually, do we have an idea of, from the end of the office building until the actual residential parcel, it's going to be, what, 60, 70 feet? To the actual residential buildings?
I think it's closer, from the property line, it's about 100 feet to the actual buildings right now, and we'll be at least 30 feet off of, well, close to 30 feet off of that. So it would be closer to, 130 feet from the office building to the apartments.
Okay.
And I think
That gives me, and there's already trees. Yeah.
I think the aerial shows one of the reasons why they did put parking in front, and why Lucigen did, and why that was approved. A lot of this is past right-of-way for Highway 12.
Yeah, and I was going to comment on that.
And they were successful in being able to buy it, as were other property owners up and down. But there's a bunch of easements, utility easements in it, and you can't build over it. The most that you can really use it for is parking.
So this parcel that's right on, Abby?
This one, Cornerstone?
No, the
Go
parcel.
north.
Go north. There's a kind of a sliver parcel.
This.
That parcel along the
Is
edge.
that,
Yeah, that's old highway right-of-way that
That's-
was acquired as part of all of the development along here.
and are you,
So we've worked closely with the state to acquire that property, and
I see it on the CSM.
Yeah,
That's
what-
what's called unplatted land.
yes,
So you're actually taking that and going all the way.
combining all of that
right up to the
together
right-of-way.
into one lot, yep.
And Matt, am I correct that there are utility easements in that?
Yeah, lots of easements,
And
lots
that's
of
why you have to put
utilities.
parking on top of it.
Right.
You can't put a building on top of
Yeah,
it.
in fact, we can't even change the grade on top of the existing utilities, fiber, gas, sanitary sewer. More than, the gas and the fiber and the electric, we can't change the grade more than a foot without completely relocating the line. So it's tough just to design even a parking lot over that space.
So that's why it is the way it is.
That's why it's, so, that might mean that the idea of a more urban footprint with a narrower street and less, less kind of shoot through traffic may not actually work.
Well, I think we were all excited when we knew that right-of-way, there was gonna be excess right-of-way and it could be purchased by property owners, and then I remember being at a meeting about property to the south and finding out all the restrictions. And it's like, well, it's nice to have that property, but you can't do too much.
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna have pretty much a lot of strip commercial look with surface parking up front and building setback.
Is the, on the aerial, Abby, can you go to the aerial again quickly? The driveway, is that lining up with the driveway across the street? Is that one that you're keeping?
Yes, that is one that we're keeping.
That's one that you're keeping, yeah, good.
To the north.
And, wait, which, scroll up a little?
Where the
It's
curb
right there
cuts
in
are.
the center.
They're
right at
taking
the-
advantage of the existing curb cuts.
You're okay.
Median breaks, I should say, sorry.
And you're keeping the second one as well, right?
Correct. We're keeping the second one, and then at the far north end, we're planning, at least right now, to eliminate that access point.
Any other questions?
How many square feet of office we're talking?
That's true.
I believe 60,000 gross.
I have a
Does the
Class A?
applicant own this property as well, the liquor store?
They do not own the liquor store.
That's why we weren't following the comment about eliminating the northern access.
I'm sorry, we're not planning to utilize that access from our site. So eliminating the use of it from our site.
Gotcha.
Right now it is connected.
Jennifer?
I noticed that there's underground parking. I'm just curious, on the elevation, I don't notice any components of that on the south elevation, and I'm wondering if you actually see the driveway coming in south.
Yes, if you look at, I don't have the elevation, it's not shown on the architectural plan, but on
Yeah.
sheet C4, the site plan, you can see we're planning on that drive coming into the south side of the building. And so access would be, you drive into the site to the east side and then go down into the underground parking.
So, can I follow up with it? You're providing 224 surface parking stalls and 47 underground. Why even waste time with underground parking stalls?
I don't have a good answer for you. I'm sure my client could answer that better. I know they've been working with a potential tenant, and they've been talking about parking and needs, and that's what has driven the site to this point.
So one of the questions we have when you think about rezoning is, the B3 has a very strict parking requirement about how many spaces per gross leasable square foot, right?
3 per 1,000, yep.
Right. But technically, our PDD ordinance does not have a mandatory parking requirement. We've usually used the underlying use from the ordinance, but part of rezoning to PDD is the flexibility of reducing parking. Now, your tenants may want parking. But one of the things I would like you to look at is whether you can get away with less parking.
Sure. No, that's good feedback.
Because especially if you're going to come asking for TIF
Exactly.
for structured parking.
Which they probably would, but I guess it would be good if we don't, if we don't need more parking, why have it?
If we have a high ordinance requirement for structured parking and then we give you TIF for the structured parking, we can save money on both sides by just lowering the parking requirements. Right, Terrence?
Because they do have, I think you do have more parking than is required, probably 30%.
We do.
Is that because they're planning on accommodating an expansion for Lucigen?
I think long-term, that is what they're looking at.
Okay.
They're trying to figure out how Lucigen can grow in place and are thinking about how to dovetail that with the parking that they could potentially provide on this site. But obviously, we're not linking them together with the submittal. I know that's what's driving part of why they have so much, or are requiring this much parking right now.
I mean, we're always fine with a developer supplying more parking than we require. But our requirements are already required too much parking, right? So we should let people provide as much parking as they want and not impose rigid minimums and then TIF for too much parking.
So I guess we are looking into that.
That's the same story. Right, George, we've gone through this again.
But we
anyway,
are-
if you could look into that
But Kurt, I thought we are looking into that, how
Yeah.
could we reduce?
Right.
Or what is?
Well, and with a
What's the
PPD,
optimal?
I mean, with a planned development district, we can change the parking requirements.
Yeah, well, but you still need to have what's required, what's optimal, so.
Right.
More questions?
Just eliminate a lane of traffic and put parking on the street. That was a joke. That was a joke. That was a joke. Don't quote me on that.
Do you have bike parking?
We will have bike parking on the site. We haven't shown that on this concept plan. We will bring that forward with a full package for design review.
Any more, Wayne?
Could you explain your approach to stormwater management on the site?
Yes, we have been working with staff on that. We plan on infiltrating the roof and a large portion of the parking lot in 3 different bioretention cells on the site. One is at the kind of along the northeast portion of the site that kind of hugs the east property line. And there are 2 basins south of the building in parking lot islands. We're also planning to utilize a regional stormwater facility that's to the south, east of the fire station. We're working, as I mentioned, with city staff on that. We will be going to Water Resources to talk to them about that as well.
Okay, thank you.
And
More,
this- oh, sorry.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to ask Matt if there's a reason why we couldn't do the CSM, the planning commission couldn't look at the CSM as part of the GIP and SIP for the public hearing on July 10th, or does it need to be done now? Not that it couldn't be, but they'd like it to be.
I don't think so, but I don't know if there is anything else I'm missing that.
I mean, if we approve a CSM, and then they don't get a rezoning to a GIP, it's just a
Right.
big
just a
B3
you're right.
parcel.
And if it could just be subject to engineering staff comments, so that, I mean, that's fine, I just wondered about it.
Well, can I make that motion? I would move to approve the CSM, subject to resolution of engineering staff comments.
I'll second.
So how about this, we are not approving the concept, right?
Well,
Let's
you
just-
could
let's
have
just do the
3 separate
CSM.
motions.
Okay. So this motion is just for the CSM. And motion has been made, seconded, so any more questions now? Okay, although,
Approve, yeah, subject to engineering staff comment.
okay, so and working with the staff, so I guess all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion for the certified survey map passes.
I would
Now we
move-
need to set
I would
a-
move to grant, what are we looking at granting?
There's a concept
approval?
review, do we need to?
How can we
need
give
to
concept
move
approval
that
if we don't have a
forward?
rezoning request?
And,
Because we can't give concept approval to something that doesn't meet the current zoning.
right, you could just give the feedback that you've
Yeah.
given, that's fine.
Okay,
It doesn't have to
okay.
be.
So now we need to set the hearing date, so.
Right, I would move to set the public hearing for the rezoning on Tuesday, July 10th at 7:05 PM.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to set the public hearing date, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes.
And I don't want to speak for the commission, but is it the general sense that we like the concept?
Thanks for your time.
With all those comments, I guess we provided him enough input so he can make that judgment, so. All right, we are on to SIP, including lighting, landscaping, and signage for High Site Enterprises, Office Building 3252 Pleasant View Road. This is item number 6.
So I looked at this in terms of the city's requirements for lighting, landscaping, and signage, and found that the plans meet the requirements on all of those fronts. I meant to include that the staff recommendation was for final SIP approval, recommend approval to the Common Council contingent on resolution of staff comments. There are some engineering staff comments that still need to be satisfied. They aren't typically things that we go over here at the Plan Commission, along with any comments that you have tonight.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so let these guys.
As outlined.
Okay, so let's have a second. Okay, all right, you guys want to present whatever you want to say?
I think we've gotten good feedback on the site plan itself. So Ken Psyche and his team have worked pretty hard to incorporate some comments that came up in the last round. I think a lot of what's left are more, like Abby mentioned, more of the engineering comments, some of the technicalities. So we'll wrap all these submittals together and submit them as one final for approval.
Okay. Any,
Never hard to question a Ken Psyche design. You always know it's gonna be good.
Ken, do you want to say anything? Anything add or delete or?
How many
Can you
jobs are
just
gonna be at this
explain-
site again? I forget.
I'm sorry?
How many employees will be at the site at full build-out?
Right up to 500 roughly, yeah.
So now in terms of the building design and all that thing, even though you have a new developer, Livesey, it's still the same as it was designed before, right?
Correct, it is, yes.
There's no change.
Not at all, no.
Okay.
And we're working through GMP pricing right now and budgeting, so if any big changes came up, we would certainly submit it to the staff for review.
Okay. Yes, David?
Can you just explain how one approaches the staff entrance, south end of the building?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there is a pathway that we've now created on the bottom south third of the site. And that pathway basically leads you to the southeast corner of the building. And from there, you'll have two options. So you can go north to the sort of centrally located staff entry, or to the west, back by the loading dock, to enter that side of the building.
Can you use your, you
Sure.
can use this keypad to just outline it on here so that they can see it in the audience?
This is the pathway, and then it brings you to a decision point or a node here where you can go north to this employee entrance or back around this pathway.
That's across the entry to the service
Correct.
ramp to underneath the building, right?
Correct, to the underground parking. Yep.
Yes, Ben?
A comment on at the northwest corner of the building. It looks like you've got a lot of drainage going right directly towards the building, given that slope in that area.
I believe the drainage slopes to the northeast, is that correct?
Right, right at that patio area, it looks like.
It's got this right here.
Oh, there's a swale around the patio.
Patio acts as a high point.
I see that for drainage is coming, that's headed north, but it looks like you've also got a good bit headed east down that slope. I think it'd be something to take a closer look at.
This way right there. But this, I think he's talking about. It's gonna be a nice building.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's gonna be very nice
It'll be nice.
use of that parcel.
So you will take care of the stormwater issues?
Absolutely, yeah. And there are other comments regarding landscaping and some utilities, so.
Okay, any other questions? So you guys are happy with the lighting, landscaping, and signage?
Do you have bike parking?
Yes.
Oh, we do have bike parking. It's all internal to the building, so there's some in the underground parking and then in the loading dock area. So right now, I think we have 16 spaces internally with room for growth.
Is the yellow around the retention pond a pathway?
Oh, yeah, that one over there.
Which yellow?
Grass.
The yellow on on this plan.
On the screen that is it on
Yeah.
the
The
screen?
landscaping
Yeah.
plan?
Yeah, this right here. Mark.
Yellow around the retention pond.
Same color.
This right
as
there.
the- Same color.
It's, so
Come to the mic.
So the yellow shade around the retention pond is a tall grass prairie planting.
Oh.
Trying to discourage waterfowl from using the surface of the
Yeah.
water.
Good question, David. Any other questions, either to Ken or the other folks?
Ken, is that gonna be a wet pond then?
There's a wet pond and then a dry pond. At the very northeast corner of the site is a dry pond, but there's a wet pond behind that, between the parking lot and the northeast corner.
Any issues with waterfowl in the airport?
Well, that's why we're.
Yeah, I understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and the slope, starting from the safety shelf and going to the deep water is a stone riprap slope. So
Okay.
again, working
that'll
on
help.
keeping the waterfall out.
Excellent. Okay, any more questions? So then the motion is to approve the lighting, landscaping, and signage for eyesight. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Okay, guys. You're done, thank you.
When do you break ground?
August 6th.
When, and you're done then in spring? You're gonna be,
Spring of what year?
yeah, you'll get done in 5 months.
Okay. We are on to a request for tax incremental District 3, Type 3 assistance for mixed-use 3-story building, Hamid Nogani, 1908 Parmenter Street.
So this project is very similar to what was previously conceptually approved by the Plan Commission and the council. The only substantive change is that the third story initially had 2 residential units and now it is 1 condominium unit. Otherwise, it's quite similar to what was previously conceptually approved. What is before you tonight is a request for TIF assistance for extraordinary costs related to demolition of the existing underground building foundation, soil mitigation and groundwater management, private sanitary sewer lift station due to shallow sewer mains, increased foundation footings, exterior firewall rating due to it being a 0 lot line right up against 2 other structures, and a special tower crane deployment. We had our city's TIF engineer review these costs along with geotechnical reports. He's met with the applicant, and he's also consulted with our city utility director, and has certified that he believes that there are $408,000 in extraordinary development costs. However, we were working with our city assessor to determine the final valuation estimate for the project, and he believes that the project value will be at around 1.8 million, which means there's 1.582 in incremental value. And I handed this out, we just got this today, so I apologize. This is an additional exhibit here. It shows the maximum amount of TIF increment that we believe will be available for the project, which is $348,000. So at the time we wrote the staff comments, we weren't sure if there would be enough value to support $408,000. There's not, we don't think. So our staff recommendation now is for approval and recommend approval to the Finance Committee and Council for $348,000 in developer finance TIF assistance for extraordinary costs.
Are there any TIF requests for tenant build-out? Sorry. Terrence didn't even hear that?
Yeah. Well,
I do have a question, actually, on the assumption of the mill rate.
Oh.
Because it's different in Terrence's project and this project.
Yep.
And one of the things I'm increasingly aware of is, given the high level of value we're adding to the city tax rolls and the levy caps by the state government, I'm assuming our mill rate's gonna go down, which would lead the increment to go down.
Yep. What we were previously using was a mill rate of 20.4. What we're estimating right now, and this is just an estimate, is 20.0. You know, with if you own property in Middleton, you probably recently received a letter saying your value is increasing. That doesn't necessarily mean your taxes are increasing by
Right.
that same percentage, because the mill rate will change based on the total assessed valuation in the city. So Bill and Bill Burns, our finance director, and Paul Messer, our city assessor, would like to use 20.0 for these types of projections for the time being until we actually have an established mill rate.
And that's what I was asking, is if it comes from Bill, then I trust those numbers. So
Yep.
Terrence is gonna have to adjust his numbers.
Well, I have several questions, and I talked to Eileen a little bit earlier. So I know this building is downtown, and we don't require parking for these buildings, but now this is, this is an open space. You are not renovating a building, and I have asked the staff, and they all say, yeah, there's a parking, they will find some place to park, but I really, like I was at MRI Bank today, and I counted how many seats they have, how many parking places they have reserved, and how many are actually open. So they have about 1/3 or maybe 40% somewhere, which are reserved, and the others are, I guess for the customers, perhaps their customers. So, and then the other thing Eileen said is that CDA has a parking lot close to the fire station. So when I looked at that parking lot, that was actually more than half full. And this was at 4:30 today. So, I don't know whoever, people come there, whether they are living there or there will be some restaurant, Eileen, you said there's a.
Yep,
So there will
first
be
floor.
need for parking. You cannot just, hand wave and say, well, they will find some place for parking. I think that's the issue you have to address. I mean, it's one thing, like in case of Terrence, that this was all, well, that was similar anyway, but this is in a smaller scale where the buildings were demolished and rebuilt, so there was a certain requirement there. So we said we didn't ask the some of the other
Right, I can
developments
explain that if
there.
you want.
But in all those cases, this was the renovation, so it wasn't that there was no building, so.
In the historic core, we traditionally have not required that the building owner and the business provide parking because they can't. Village Green doesn't have any place to do it. Free House, the Opera House, the Dufresne building that Villa Dolce is in, the Bloom Bakery building. We have never required that. In this case, there was an existing building, pins and pleats. The architect, the property owner tried to save it and couldn't. And so it came down. And to put parking here would virtually mean that this lot stays empty. It's 33 feet wide. They can't even fit one single row of parking
They
in.
can't,
Well,
wouldn't even
they
have
can't
the
get any-
turning
radius,
radius
yeah.
to even get one car.
Fit the building in.
No, it doesn't have to be there. But as we were in one of those meetings, there has to be some reservation where their clients will be using that space, whether it's with the M&I Bank or whether it's in a city parking lot or whether it's in CDA. We can't just not address that issue. I mean, you cannot just say that, okay, they're going to find a parking place.
Hardy, may I comment?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Just-
Yeah, go ahead, go to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Address
The
identify yourself.
The
and-
largest, my name is Hamid Nogani, I'm the property owner and have been there for 10 years, not trying really hard, but trying to build the building. It's a bigger conversation, right? It's not about just this one building. And as long as you're willing to walk 5 minutes, you get a lot of parking. So it's just a matter of your appetite for walking. If you don't want to walk, then I think Middleton is not for you. If you want to walk, there are plenty of parking. I mean, I live and work not all the time, but I'm pretty much downtown. I have a lot of property downtown. If you walk a couple blocks, you're going to hit more parking than you ever want. So I think this view of we want parking right by our building, I think if you really want that, I think there, on the other side of the highway, there are those options. Here, you just walk, and that solves the problem.
So where do you?
The bigger risk is for me to build a building there and not have parking. If I'm willing to take it, then I recommend that you let me.
Well,
Agree
yeah, you are willing to
fundamentally.
take it, but how about there will be some people that, for other businesses, they're parking somewhere, and they will have a difficult time once this is there. So there has to be some.
That's a different argument. Are you suggesting that by me putting a building there, other people are disadvantaged? I mean, that's a very big argument.
No, well, in terms of parking, I mean that, but at least there should be some sort of a, consideration that where your clients are going to park. Yes, Kurt?
So he's not requesting a rezoning,
No.
and the zoning ordinance does not require him to put in parking. So are you suggesting that this would be a condition of TIF assistance? Because then
Where are we gonna go with that?
we're gonna have to pay more for, I mean, I've said my view before, which is I would draw a line around most of the downtown area and just declare it a no minimum parking, like, no developer has to provide parking. If you wanna provide parking, you can do it for your tenants, your clients, your employees. If you don't, people can park on the street.
So you
It's a
would
city.
Would
right?
you have said the
And we
same-
start charging for street parking, and I mean, if a developer is willing to take a risk and a bank is gonna lend him money to build retail that doesn't have parking,
Let them.
let him take that risk.
So would you have said the same thing to T-Ball?
Yes, I would have said, as few parking, now he parked.
No, that's a different story.
That's a
Let me
different
just-
story there,
that's a
because you
different
have the
story.
apartments.
If it's feasible,
Right.
if it's feasible and reasonably, and you're willing to pay for that parking, then that's a different
We
story.
required it and then gave him 10 million for TIF to do it.
So you essentially bought yourself some parking beneath this building.
Well, and it was also the issue that when you have hundreds of apartments, you have a slightly greater impact on the surrounding neighbors and business owners than, what, 6,000 square feet? What's your gross square feet?
It's about 11,000 square feet, but it is a mixed use. So assumption is some people that live in the building also work in the building, and that includes somebody that I know.
If someone wants to
close.
park, there's some parking around the corner that they can pay for.
Look, they can park
They can
on
rent
the
a parking
street.
stall from Terrence.
Terrace-
A nice heated
Terrace-
indoor
Terrace
underground
is more
parking.
than willing to rent it to me.
And maybe some.
And I'm
people-
more than willing to rent it from him.
Well, some people that work in your building might live in the Middleton Center apartments.
Look, it all will even itself out. It's just, we can't force the situation that it doesn't want
If
it.
the old building was still around, we would have no legal basis for mandating additional parking.
Right.
Except that it was condemned, but that's another story.
But this
Termites.
only applies to a very small number of buildings, too.
Well, this is the last one you probably have to deal with for near
Right.
future.
It applies only to the
Well, in
certain
terms of,
part of the
right,
downtown?
the free house, when that building became vacant and was then used for the restaurant.
No parking.
Said we did not require that. Again, same for Village Green. There's a certain area, we call it the historic core of the downtown, and there is no parking available to those. They use the public parking spaces that are available, and on the street as well, but there's a lot of public lots around. We did not count the number, but there's hundreds, I think, in terms of parking spaces.
I think you did a
Available.
study and they determined that plenty of parking spaces are available just a
But
few
we
years.
probably
That
have
was
too
even
many
a s-
parking spaces downtown.
That study was even done by a company that designs parking structures.
Right.
So a lot of people, at the time when we hired Walker to do the
Yeah.
study, they said, oh, it's a predetermined,
Right. That's what people call
decision or outcome that they're gonna recommend you need a ramp, and then they're gonna design it. But they didn't. They said we didn't.
Okay, other questions?
From a practical standpoint, if you expect them to put parking in, the only place they can go in is underground, which is gonna jack the prices
Oh,
way
yep,
up. We've
exactly.
already talked about the fact that they won't support the TIF request then.
Yeah.
And so nothing is gonna happen.
No, you can't park on, it was just like having, either talking to the bank or somewhere, wherever.
Can I just
Right.
state a couple things about some of the ideas that have been raised? So I can pretty much tell you that the bank and St. Bernard's are not going to allow the rental or the use of any of their parking. We know this because we have tried and tried and tried, and we've also tried with the funeral home as well. We've been going through this for probably 4 or 5 years. Terrence has gone through it with St. Bernard's. We've talked about I worked with Marilyn Burke, who was here a minute ago, for a while, trying to just move the farmer's market one day a week into one of their lots, and they are not willing to allow any of their parking to be used during the day. For the church, it's actually an issue that causes them concern over their tax exempt status.
Yes.
There are a couple of things that we have done creatively. One is that our city clerk issues parking passes to tenants in the downtown who live in a building that does not have parking. So in the historic Opera House building, there are a couple of units above that. They don't have parking. We allow those tenants to park overnight in the lot between City Hall and the Senior Center. The pass must be visible. Mike Davis, our city administrator who lives close by, goes by there and he sees about 7 cars early every morning, and it's those 7 tenants who have received that parking pass. The CDA parking lot is also open and available for parking. It's right across University Avenue, and at 3:45 this afternoon, there were 23 stalls open and available. And I know, Hamid and his staff, I see them walking around the downtown all the time. So
Yeah.
I know, his architectural studio will likely be one of the tenants in this building, and I know that they're willing to walk. Just to mention a couple of other restaurants, I think Eileen hit on most of these, but, Free House, Village Green, Vinsanto, Louisiane's, Villa Dolce, those are 5 other restaurants. If you include Roman Candle and the new deli that's locating right next to Roman Candle, I think they have about 6 stalls in the back. Most of the restaurants in the downtown do not provide parking if they're in the historic core.
Okay, so there's
Yeah,
some
let's-
solutions. So there's at city parking and CDA and, okay.
And let's
Okay,
just,
all
let's
right.
just, let's just state what we want. We want a downtown that's urban and walkable.
Yes,
Okay,
And,
and vibrant.
And we're
And-
fortunate
and-
that Terrace has it
Right.
underground
And
parking
so-
that's willing to lease.
we're not,
Yes,
we're not gonna
yes.
keep jacking up all the parking in an urban downtown walkable area.
okay, so,
I would move recommendation to the council of TIF in the amount of $348,084.
I'll second.
okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion of $348,084 TIF recommendation to the city council, say aye. Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. All right.
You could use some of the lifts in
I've
Lifton
already
side.
tested them and they work very well. Thank you.
And this next one is, I prepared the memo that you have in your packet. I also want to make it clear that the staff comments that were within our rest of the staff comments for this meeting were mine, and it's not a staff consensus to recommend approval of additional TIF. But the reason that I did is because if we look at, if we go back, and this is what I said to the council last week when it got referred here, the original amount of the TIF being requested was about $12.5 million plus interest. It was determined through the, look at the proposed value at the time, and the pro forma, the developer's pro forma, that they could only support about 2/3 or 3/4 of that amount. And that was the staff recommendation, and that was the council approval at that time, was about, I think it was about 75% of that cost plus interest. At this point, they've spent even more than that because of increased cost, some of the pilings, but they've also created more value. For phase 1, the assessor is thinking that it's about $5 million or $4.8 million more than had originally been anticipated. And because this is a tough site, it's downtown development, it's taking down buildings with existing value, so you're starting with a higher base. And I think what it went back to for me is, if they had come in with the costs that we know now, which are higher than originally anticipated and they're reasonable TIF eligible expenses, would the staff recommendation have been, and would the planning commission and council recommendation have been to approve a higher amount? And I think that's where, probably, I know my recommendation would have been yes. I don't know, I can't speak for the planning commission and the council, obviously, but my staff recommendation would have been yes to go higher to cover that. And it's developer financed, so we're not putting the money on the table. And we're also recommending a look back, so that we're looking at their rate of return and saying what's a reasonable amount. And Bill Burns has the industry range, the standard or expected amount. And is it within that? Right now, I think it's below it. So if we look back and say, in 2 years or 5 years, their rate of return is a lot higher than anticipated, then maybe there's some sharing of that additional, maybe it gets ratcheted down somewhat, but so it's not a windfall. Anyway, that's my recommendation.
Abby, do you want to say anything, or Mark?
Just wanted to mention that I handed this out. I also emailed it to you this afternoon, and I apologize for it being so late. I feel like our staff has just been apologizing a lot. We had a crazy week last week. If you have any questions about the information in the memo, I'm available to answer questions.
Sorry, I forgot to mention it, 'cause this is really good information, Abby.
Do you want to walk through? Because these are the questions which,
Yes, yep, I'd be happy to.
which the plan commission had asked you to answer.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, go ahead, maybe.
So one of the questions was reviewing other communities and how TIF assistance is provided for retail uses. I was a little unclear on whether you guys were looking for whether TIF is provided for retail in general or whether TIF is provided for tenant build-out. But we kind of surveyed what the city of Middleton has done in the past, and we have provided TIF assistance for retail when it's within a mixed-use development. For example, Tresta and Middleton Center. We've also, in some cases, provided TIF assistance for extraordinary costs of development for retail uses that are strictly retail. One example would be Costco. They had pretty significant stormwater issues and also pilings that were required, and they received TIF assistance. The Goodwill store recently received TIF assistance for solar on their building.
So now that's not in your memo here, right?
That's not in the memo, no. So just to give you an idea, talked to a couple of people in other communities. Kurt sent me over to Dan Rolfe in Madison. We chatted for quite some time. He's a great, hilarious guy. Had a really good conversation. And initially his thought was, well, we don't really have a program strictly for retail, but as we kept talking about it, he remembered that the city of Madison has a downtown matching grant program. And that primarily is targeted toward the TIF district that covers State Street. And that's because the city of Madison really wants to get more retailers to help even out the restaurants and bars that we all know on State Street. So it's a matching grant program of up to $50,000 to assist with capital costs associated with renovating the interior and exterior of retail spaces. So it's not for a brand new tenant build out, but it's pretty comparable, I would say, to this request, with the exception that this is a grant program. It's not tied to additional tax increment being generated, and it goes directly to the tenant. So I provided a link in the memo so you can learn more about that program. Sun Prairie has written TIF guidelines, and they state that it's not a policy to utilize TIF for the sole purpose of creating new retail opportunities. But again, TIF can be used for a project that includes retail as one component. We looked at how TIF assistance had been provided for economic development incentives in Middleton previously. Again, that's not really what we're looking at now with the compromise that Eileen has presented. Where previously we were looking at, could the city provide economic development assistance to the office tenants within Middleton Center? But you guys had asked the question, so I wanted to provide you with a couple of examples for how we've done that in the past. One example was WTS Paradigm. They were relocating from a facility in Middleton to another facility in Middleton, and they pledged to maintain 127 full-time equivalent jobs in Middleton. We have an agreement with them that includes a look back and a clawback if the level of jobs is not met. It's developer finance TIF assistance. There was a breakdown of the 420. Part of it was for reimbursement of actual verified moving costs, and then part of it was for reimbursement of the improvements to the new building. And both of those required verification of the costs. Another example was Natus Neurology, which received a commitment of $400,000 in developer finance TIF assistance to keep its headquarters in Middleton at a new location. I think didn't they leave the location that WTS Paradigm went into? Okay, so it was around the same time. And that also included a requirement for maintaining jobs at the property, and it included a clawback provision. So we talked with our city assessor, Paul Musser, about how the assessed value of Phase 1 of Middleton Center would be impacted if the spaces remain vacant. And he noted that the current Middleton Center Phase 1 assessment, which I think is just over 20.5 million, if I'm remembering that number correctly, it's based on the approved plan. If it continues to remain vacant, the city assessor would need to reduce the valuation for the property. We also asked him if Phase 1 remains vacant, would this have a negative impact on other property values in the downtown? And he said, no, it would not affect them negatively. However, in the long term, it's possible that it could affect them positively as the spaces within Middleton Center fill up. The information from our city attorney clarifying the but-for test, we got this information from our assistant city attorney, Matt Fleming. He weighed in on this at the city council meeting as well last week a little bit, and I basically took his comments verbatim and pasted them into this document. So I'll just let you guys read those comments. And then one of the questions that came up is, are there any other alternative scenarios that the developer could consider? And we felt like, that's more a question for the developer who knows more about, what other financing options might be available. But one idea that we had would be assistance from the Middleton Area Development Corporation. I think they mostly just do loans at this point, but I think they're considering a grant opportunity as well. And then reviewing the original development assistance, the original development agreement for TIF assistance, I emailed that to you. It's written very similarly to our other agreements, which basically set a max cap on the amount of TIF assistance that will be provided. And then in one of the exhibits, it shows what the split is between the assistance or the incremental tax value each year that goes toward the project and what percent goes toward the city. So for example, on the Tresta development, which is pretty much a greenfield development, that's a 70-30 split. We believe that will be, overall, the city will receive 30% of the incremental value from that project and the developer will receive 70%. But we also are requiring that split be allocated annually. So right away, beginning in year one of assessed value increase, the city gets our 30% and the developer gets her 70%.
And
So-
that's also developer financed.
That's also developer finance, yep. So if if we miss the mark on the assessed value, either up or down, that would impact the city's 30%. I guess if the assessed value comes in higher, the city will end up getting more than the 30%. If the assessed value comes in lower, we'll still get the 30% of the incremental value that's generated, but our 30% will be lower than what we initially anticipated, as well as the developers, if that makes sense. So, like we said at the last meeting, when we entered into the agreement for Middleton Center, we assumed that agreement was accounting for 100% of the value that the project would generate. And so the way that the agreement is written is up to that cap, 100% of the incremental tax value will go toward the developer. If the value is higher, just looking under the current agreement, the loan would pay back sooner, and then the city would have incremental value in the later years of the TIF. But the city will not get incremental value from this project toward the general benefit of the TIF, anytime for many years, because 100% of the incremental
When does the
value
TID
is
close?
going.
Sorry, that TID closes
That's
2030
2030 with spending through 2025, right?
And we're going to keep it open for a year for the affordable housing, but.
Oh, of course. So
Any,
that-
okay,
that's all I
anybody?
got.
Okay, where do we start then?
Make a comment?
Yes, Dave.
My concern last time we did this was not that I worry about the money. Have staff seen the letters of intent
from the six firms, six
Tenants.
tenants that Terrence talked about last time we were here?
Our city attorney has reviewed 2 of the leases. 3? Okay. Taylor says 3 and I believe him. Okay. So, yeah, you know, we really felt uncomfortable having the leases sent to us because they wanted to keep them confidential. So we had Taylor meet with our city attorney at his office and review them. So it sounds like 3 of the 5 or 4. Okay, 3 of the 4 have been looked at by the city attorney. And they do include a provision that allows T-Wall to back out, I guess, of the lease agreement if the additional TIF assistance is not secured.
But not if the TIF assistance is secured, then they would have to stick with it.
I believe that's the only contingency.
So how about the 4th client? Is he still looking at it, or you're going to, what's the issue with that one?
Microphone.
Yeah.
The 4th tenant didn't want us making their lease, they didn't want us showing it to the city. So at that point, I haven't followed up on it. It was last Tuesday, Matt said he saw 3 out of the 4, and he said, he was happy with that. And that was also, we've now taken a shift in our direction of our TIF request per Eileen's recommendation to focus on the TIF eligible expenses and the additional value that we've created rather than the, tenants, the previous proposal we came to you guys was about the build out, shortfall for the tenants. So we're not going that way. Now we're focusing on the TIF eligible expenses.
Yes, Kurt.
Well, since Terrence is asking for $1 million, we gotta at least run him through. Do you want to come up? I have some questions. And I'll just
Popcorn.
It's going to kill me to agree with both Terrence and George in the same. But here's why I'm conflicted, right? So this is going to be on the one hand, on the other hand. On the one hand, you take this whereas clause in the developer's agreement. Whereas the developer will incur $12.5 million in extraordinary costs, which the city hereby determines are eligible project costs, right? So that seems to be pretty simple.
Right, okay.
You didn't get $12.5 million because the projected pro rata value didn't generate that increment, but now you do. So that's why I'm leaning towards supporting this. On the other hand, I have a couple of questions. And this is not meant, as I see the additional $5.2 million in value, by my calculations, at least $3.9 million of that value comes from CAM, right? 7% cap rate. CAM is what? Additional $273,000 per year. Okay. I am having a difficult time conceptualizing how an experienced commercial property developer and his investors missed almost $4 million in value. Right? Which, the reason it's strange is, had it been in there in the original pro forma, you would have generated your $12.5 million in increment, and we wouldn't be here. So I'm really confused why
Sure. So
you know what triple net is, so you expect CAM in there, right?
Right. So I know what triple net is. One of my staff members who was doing the pro forma, include the expense, didn't include the revenue, and didn't understand that, and I missed it. So it's my fault because I didn't catch that as being an omission.
None of your investors caught that?
They wouldn't
I'm
go
surprised
through
by
that. They wouldn't go through that level of detail. They see a summarized version of a pro forma. They don't see all the detailed laid out, line item by line item. Unless they ask
I know
for
Dan
it.
and I, if I were investing,
They can ask for it, yes.
Would want to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I can't help myself.
Go ahead.
But the value that was determined was also determined with the previous finance director, John Lehman. And that $15 million value is his calculation. So when
Right.
Bill shows you the terms, it's his calculation and it's his omission of the CAM. So I'm actually not, I wasn't in those meetings with Tyler and John Lehman, but I'm not sure that CAM was not on our previous pro forma. I think it's more that Cam was not included
The
when
revenue wasn't.
John put together his summary of what the value would be based on his projections. Because again, John or any finance director,
that's
now
enough
Bill,
detail.
takes our pro forma and then puts it into his own.
Right.
pro forma.
The bottom line is I missed it. I should have caught it.
That sounded close to an apology, so we'll.
Well, it is, yeah.
No,
I'm human. I make
no,
mistakes. I make
that's
mistakes.
That's the question that's hanging over our head, not
Sure.
to give you guys anything to write about. But the question is this an honest mistake?
Mm-hmm.
And in any complex negotiation, numbers are gonna change, construction costs are gonna come up, values are gonna come up. We
Mm-hmm.
are flexible, we adapt, we don't sue each other like in Madison, we work it
Right.
out. Or is it kind of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, some people in the public might think, oh, he's trying to pull a fast one, so that's why I was asking. I just
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
wanted to see.
I mean, it's still developer finance TIF, so it's our dollars. We're at risk.
Right.
So just
You don't get your,
for the taxpayers to know
You don't
that
get your rent,
there's
you
no
don't get
risk to
your
the city.
increment.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
well, there's no risk to the city, but in essence, we are providing
A
we're
benefit.
helping you on the
That's
equity
right.
side
A
so that
benefit.
your debt costs are lower.
Right.
So it is
Right.
some benefit to you.
Yes.
So I guess the other question is, and since I don't see the pro forma, are you still getting your full 15% developer's fee on phase one?
So we do not take any developer's fee out ourselves. We, first of all, contribute cash, just along with our investors. I contribute cash, right? And then we also are allowed some value or sweat equity, we'll call it, that we're allowed to count towards overall equity, but we're still required to put in at least 15% cash.
So in essence, you're deferring your developer's fee until the TIF is paid off?
I never take it out. I'm unusual in that sense for a developer. I never take out the developer's fee. I never pay myself or my company a developer's fee in cash. Never, ever. It
That
stays in. Yep, it's our contribution.
That would have, if you did, that would have
Yeah.
been, you know,
Right.
I think a reasonable request would have been some skin in the game. to
Absolutely,
share it.
right. So we put cash in on top of it. I put cash in. You know, all other developers pay themselves cash in a developer's fee.
Exactly.
Right. So
Although
I just
a lot
feel
of
that's
them-
not
A
right.
lot of them will defer some of that when there's a
Right.
TIF or a LIHTC, but, okay. You're still getting management fees, so we're not,
Right, to cover, that's
You're
to
not-
cover the.
you're not hurting.
Right, the staff, the overhead, that's a break even, right.
Then the only other question I have is, your Exhibit E here has an assumed mill rate of 20.5. And Abby just told us that Bill's gonna use 20.0, which by my calculations would change the revised increment to 390,764 a year, which would only generate increment of 4.689 million, which would come in less than the additional 1.24 that you're requesting.
And how much would it come in?
Come in
less
at, by my very rough, quickened calculations, come at 977.
I think that's really reasonable to look at reducing that, then to be
Well,
more
and-
conservative. We're
and-
usually try to be very conservative anyway.
Right, and so that's what I learned from Dan Rolfs when he walked through Madison's TIF policies, that they have the assumed mill rate go down over the bid.
Can we
But
lock
again-
in that
again-
lower mill rate?
But again, they don't do developer finance, so it's a completely different, it's apples and oranges.
Right.
I mean, I'm fine with, as long as we're in for 100% developer financed, we're in for 100% developer finance.
Yeah.
I'm just not convinced you'll get
All that.
the full 4.8 in increment.
Yeah, we are assessed at about, is it correct to say we're about 5 million more than what
Yeah.
was projected in the
Right, the
original?
5.2 million.
Right, so even though the mill rate's going down a little, the assessment's gone up by 33%.
Well, and again, this assumes that we have no increase in value over 12 years, right? So this assumes that our value over 12 years does not increase over
Right, right.
$20.6 million, which if
Right.
we can get a $20.6 million assessment when we've got 75% vacancy as of January 1st, I can't imagine the value that we'll get when this thing's full on top of, put it out 10 years.
And I think
Well, and
that's-
the assessed value is based on it being full.
Okay.
You had to base it on the plan
Right.
since,
True.
it
Yes.
was a new.
But it's also
But the-
full based
the-
on the current rent, not, over time there's escalators.
Will the developers agreement give a dollar amount, or will it say 100% of the
I
increment?
think it should have a dollar amount, because then we do share in the increase. And what we
Yes.
don't, what we do is we don't assume an increase in the value. It's more conservative, but then the city will benefit from that
Right.
if it does go up, either our mill rate or the value. And I think that it should be a cap just like it was before, because then we get the share.
And, I mean, those were the questions I had, so now I'm
Okay,
inclined
I
to
got
to
few
support.
general questions. You're done, Kurt?
And are you okay with this, if this is conditional on a look-back, kind of back-end rate of return?
Sure. We got to talk about the details with staff, but that's fine. I mean,
And again,
that's been done elsewhere.
That's something I recommend, that comes from Madison, that
Yeah, right.
they do a, kind of a front door
Right.
rate of return, because they don't want TIF to give someone an excessive rate of return.
Right.
Any other?
But I think this is a nice compromise from where we were last.
Yeah, I like this also better than what was before. Now I have few general questions. That's for you, Terrence. Now, knowing what you know now, what could you have done that your place was all rented by now? Lower the rent, more incentives? Was there any possibility, was there something which you could have done that you would have a better place now than where you are now?
Well, a couple things. One is, I think one is out of our control, and that was the hurricanes, then going into a tight construction market, labor market, then the tariffs coming in place. So that's all outside of our control in terms of the construction costs skyrocketing. And we used to be able to do build-outs for $25 a foot. You know, we got bids back at $65 to $70 a foot for a typical retail store like these retailers. For a restaurant, I mean,
500.
$150 to $200 a foot. It's ridiculous. It's
When's the last time you
unbelievable.
did a build-out for 25 a square foot?
Well, I haven't built the buildings, in the last few years. So, but when we did typical office buildings, for a typical office tenant, without like a kitchen or without something unique, a law firm or a bank would be more, right? But a typical build-out, we could always get it done for 25. But you just can't even touch that today. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're spending as much on tenant build-outs today, right, as per foot as whole buildings used to cost. It's incredible. But the other part we could have done differently. We had two brokers, one and then another third-party brokers we were working with to try to lease the space, and frankly, I don't think they did it. They didn't get results. That's just the bottom line. They just didn't get results, and then I took it over myself with some help internally with my staff, and moved quickly to try to secure. And we did secure 4 leases. We're at 1 or 2 more that we're looking at pending this outcome. One of which is moving from the Parmenter office buildings over here if they get some assistance. So we're, I think, just being more involved in that leasing process ourselves. Had we done that earlier, we probably could have potentially saved some delays and maybe gotten in before the hurricanes hit. I mean, we did have Penca, which was Pasquale's, remember that? And during the process that we were getting their liquor license approved, the hurricanes hit, and then their bids that they put out came in extraordinary, and then they pulled out. So maybe, what could we have done differently? Maybe if we had not hired an outside broker, maybe had just done that in-house, we might have been able to beat the hurricanes. That might be one thing.
So knowing what you know now, then, so what do you plan to do going forward that your project is fully successful? I'm sure you don't want to come back for the same thing again because, you have sort of reached the limit. So what do you plan to do now? So.
Well, with this assistance, we have actually some other prospects who are literally waiting in their wings. We're in the process of either negotiating a letter of intent or discussions or negotiating a lease subject to. And those prospects, then we will try to move quickly to try to get those secured and get some of more of the retail leased up, and then potentially a little bit more of the office space also leased. And then that would leave us with maybe about a floor and a half of the office left to lease up. But now we'll have more the light at the end of the tunnel. We'll know what we can offer. We'll be able to say, we've got a schedule of dollars per build out per space. And we'll be able to go out to these tenants and say, hey, you know, we can do this, it's very definitive, we can get you in by this timetable, we can cover these costs and make this happen and get the space filled up. Right now, we're kind of in the twilight zone, right? We're kind of, you know, the money's not there, so how do we, you know, the build-out cost is here, here's what we have available, we can't get any more out of the bank. We did approach Middleton Area Development Corp. Some of these tenants are startups, so they can't, you know, afford to pay the debt service on even a low-interest loan. And they would be required under that scenario also to have some equity, so they have to put up some cash. And some of the startups can't do that. You know, the others who have been in business, like the women's clothing store, might be able to. I'm not representing that. I'm just saying that, you know, if they've been in business for a while, a few years, maybe they could do some assistance. But I think it'd be great to see Middleton Area Development Corp do a program like Madison has, some kind of grant system to help startups to, you know, start in business and get going and grow with a grant. Because, you know, they're competing against Amazon. They're competing against these massive retailers that are really low priced, buying overseas products, and whereas the locals here are paying a higher cost for wholesale for their products and typically are getting those in the U.S. So it's harder for them to compete. You know.
The third one is that, you know, your phase 1 is done, and your phase 2 is about half or 1/3 done. So how do you plan to apply? You know, we have given you all the TIF we could give for phase 2 now.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything more which you could ask for. So how do you plan to apply these lessons there, that we are not in the same mess again?
So in phase 2, we did catch this, and remember we went and backtracked and trued up the numbers, so we were able to include that full amount of TIF in phase 2, so we won't need to come back, we shouldn't come back, wouldn't be appropriate to come back. And we are talking with a business right now. We have about 14,000 square feet of retail, no office, and it's a good reason. I'm glad that we got rid of that second floor of office. In fact, the party that signed the letter of intent for that second floor of office just passed away a week ago. And his company is now up in a state of flux, right? Because he's gone, the founder, the owner. So I'm glad we got rid of that second floor of office and went to apartments. And so we've got 14,000 square feet of retail. We have a prospect for 10,000 of it, and it's a really good prospect. And we have on the remainder piece, the 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, we've got some prospects for fitness centers that could be available to our residents, but also to the public. So it'd be a downtown fitness center type facility, and we're using some of our TIF funds to help them because of their costs are high, and we're trying to help them be successful in their plan, and we're in the process of doing floor planning with them right now. So we might, if we're lucky, have that all committed before opening in February. But
So you're pretty sure now that you are not coming back again because...
Oh, we can't, yes.
Okay.
We've used the full amount.
Okay,
Right.
yeah. Any other questions for Terrence? Yeah,
Sure.
Wayne?
Anyway.
Terrence, when you came to the last meeting, so the justification was to help tenants with their build-out costs. I understand that the rationale for changing the basis for the request. How does this now help those prospective tenants? I mean, how does the reallocation of the money address the key issue of having the spaces occupied and rented?
Well, money's fungible, right? I mean, we have to meet certain technicalities for the city, but the money's fungible, so we can shift other dollars to help them, right? Take these dollars, put them towards X, and then take those dollars, put them towards helping those tenants. So the goal is to get the place filled up, get the full assessment. We did run a calculation. If we don't get it filled up, instead of a $20.6 million assessment, we'll be in the range of $9 to $12 million assessment. Now, obviously, that would be every year could go up, right? So, as we fill up, it might increase.
Have you made commitments then to help those tenants with the build-out costs?
Yes, subject to this, yes. Yeah, which the city attorney has seen,
Okay,
right,
thank you.
yes.
Other questions for Terrence? Yes, Kurt.
I'm hesitant to bring this up. I'm not sure how to bring it up, but I think that when you appear before council, there may be questions about the idea of kind of squaring the circle of, on the one hand, coming hat in hand asking for TIF assistance, and on the other hand, perceptions of lobbying efforts against the city's interests. And so I'm just saying that council may be asking questions about that, and I'm just raising it as an issue.
Okay, David? And
Well, the whole thing, I'll be honest, I'm not comfortable with it. I will support it only because of the fact that it's, the original agreement is 100% of the increment. I don't like the fact it came back. I don't like the fact that, Terrence, you've been in business a long time, you're a smart guy, and this is a pretty big mistake. Overlook, if you will. I think that we as a city have, I mean, let's not fool ourselves with your question, Wayne, how is this going to affect it? Basically, we just used a different argument to get money for build-out. I mean, all we did was rephrase the question, or rephrase the answer, if you will. So you had to do a little bit of mental gymnastics to do that. I don't like the way that this has worked out. That's my opinion.
But
Yes,
having said that, I think it's imperative to get the downtown working. And this gets the downtown working. It brings activity, it brings business, it brings collateral assistance to other people who are in the other businesses that are in the downtown area. And so it's something that we've almost got to do, I think, to make it work.
Yeah, I think you start to run into
that's the only reason I will support it, but I do have a question here for the staff that what checks and balances do we want to put to ensure that the money is used for what it is intended? And that means phase one. That money is used and every penny is used to get the tenants there and to fill up that place. I want to make sure that that happens, because that is, if that doesn't happen, we haven't really achieved anything. So, yeah.
No, Eileen.
Well, I think our city attorney, and I can't remember, Abby, right now what the phrase was, but he had a phrase that would ensure that it was not, I can't remember what it was.
And that's all covered by the developer's agreement, and he can't get a draw from the increment unless he shows the receipts to the city, to the TIF engineer anyway, right?
Well, we want that receipts should be for getting those tenants in phase one, because this is for phase one.
We've already looked at the phase one costs. I mean, you know, the actual invoices, we have them. I mean, well, we don't have them, but we reviewed them. I didn't, but our engineer did.
Oh,
right?
I think
What's the phrase?
I
There's a
don't
phrase.
remember the phrase, but I think that Matt Fleming's line of thinking was that we wouldn't consider the project now complete until the space is fully built out. So that would be what would kick in.
There's something.
That would be what would kick in
Yeah, I guess.
additional like TIF assistance.
Yeah, that's what
So-
that's what our
the
assistant
tenants are
attorney
there.
said, yeah.
Until there are tenants occupying the
Yeah,
space
the
or
really
something like that.
simple-
It was a simple way to go about it, and it made a
Sorry.
lot of sense, but I can't remember the phrasing he used.
Well, as Kurt has said, it is the developer financed. It is the developer which borrows the money. The taxpayers are not stuck with it, so that is the good part there. And I'm sure that since it's his money, he's going to make every possible effort so that this place is filled up.
So I'm about to make a motion, but I want to get a sense of what the motion is, because if I say up to 1.243 million as the request, then that's higher than the mill rate that Abby has said Bill is using right now. but then if I say up to 977, and I haven't worked out the math with the finance interest rate, but then what if it does come in at a little more value? So I'm not sure how to phrase the motion. Do we want to say up to 100%? Do we want to say up to 100% of the forecasted increment, but direct bill to figure out the exact amount based on a 20 mil rate rather than a 20.5
I think you
mil rate?
want the bill to work it out, since it's going to the city council in a week, so he will have enough time to work that out. So maybe make a
So my motion would be to recommend developer finance TIF for Middleton Center Phase 1 based on the incremental value as determined by Bill Burns.
Okay.
And subject to the kind of look back rate of return described in Eileen's memo.
Okay, need a second.
Seconded. Oh, all right.
Should we add some adjustment based on the language you were talking about related to the build-out?
And direct that the developer's agreement reflect the concerns of Plan Commission that these, that Phase 1 tenants be assisted. I'm not sure what the legal term is, but be to the benefit of the completion of Phase 1.
Yeah,
We
either
both
either
did.
David or Dan, they both.
We both did.
Simultaneous second.
I can only put one. No, I'm just kidding.
It's easier to spell.
Yeah. They're both really easy.
Okay, any
So
questions?
the motion directs it to the builder,
Bill Burns, yes,
right?
yep.
And,
No
and
doubt.
no, to Bill Burns, the finance director, for the dollar amount to council, because it'll probably be slightly less than 1.243 million,
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
or how he wants to structure it, whether it's
Okay,
100%
so
of increment
the,
or.
you heard the motion, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. All right, this is the, next one is a request, this is item number 9, request for additional tax incremental District 5 funding Northeast Middleton connector path. Who's gonna take it? Eileen?
Mark is.
Mark?
So at your place tonight is a memo from me reflecting the action of the Pedestrian Bicycle Transit Committee earlier this evening. The issue is this: we have Northeast Middleton Connector design services. We went out for RFP a month ago or so. We've got 3 responses for designing a path between Old Creek Road and Highland Way as a first phase, and then from Highland Way, the signalized intersection east to the city limits as a second phase. Unfortunately, we only budgeted $75,000 for this year for design engineering services. The lowest cost estimate provided by the 3 responses is the lowest cost is $205,000 with the range up to $296,000 depending on real estate costs. And the second lowest was, that was KL Engineering, by the way. The second lowest is CORE, C-O-R-R-E, and they were at, I want to say 285,000. I just realized I don't have that note with me. And then the highest one, when Mead and Hunt was the highest one at $410,000, which was obviously much higher than the other 2. So I focused my review on the other 2 and shared those proposals, all 3, with the Pedbike Transit Committee. And their guidance tonight was reaffirming my recommendation, which is that we select KL Engineering for design engineering services at a cost not to exceed $296,000, and I'm hopeful and quite hopeful that it will be less than that. And then to increase the TIF District 5 funding request from $75,000 to that amount, $296,000. That is the.
This is just for the design.
Just for design, yeah.
Would the actual trail,
It would be separate.
would that be,
Construction,
would that
yeah.
come out of TIF as well?
That would, yes.
Any idea how much? 3, 4, 5 million?
Oh, it better not be that.
Yeah, okay.
I do not know. At this point, given how shockingly high the design proposals were. You know, I can understand if construction costs have gone up for the reasons we've all heard, you know, everything from, well, you know, hurricanes to demand in this area and Foxconn. I mean, there's all sorts of factors that are causing construction costs to go up. I don't know why the design engineering has spiked so much. I thought the proposals were pretty comprehensive. You know, I don't think they were, well, I'm hopeful that we don't need to do as much real estate work as was outlined by KL and by Core and Mead and Hunt, all three actually. And KL had the most flexibility with their pricing for the real estate work, which means if we have less to do, for example, if we have successful discussions with property owners, there's also this whole issue of the state law that doesn't allow you to condemn for right-of-way acquisition.
Doesn't allow you eminent domain for
right.
Bike
for
or
bike
ped
path, excuse me. Yep.
facilities.
Thank you for clarifying. So, and Core really did a nice job outlining that constraint. I think we have a good strategy for how we can work with adjoining property owners so that we won't have that issue. I've already talked with a few of the property owners, and you know, I'm finding some agreement that there's a need for these, but there's also some property owners that don't support this trail, so we're looking at an option behind their homes. Without getting into more detail, the issue here is the TIF funding request, and the request is to exceed the 75 that was previously authorized, recommended by Plan Commission, authorized by Council, and to increase that number. Unfortunately, what is that, 4? Yeah, by a factor of 4 to 296.
So Mark, there was one idea that staff could do some of this work.
I broached that at the staff meeting with Matt Amundsen.
With all your extra free time.
Yeah.
With all my extra free time. Well, you know, we do have some very capable engineering staff in-house. And they do a variety of projects over the years. You know, the one of the biggest problems is then you're foregoing other projects that they have on their to-do list. You know, they each have responsibilities that are annual responsibilities. For example, our sidewalk maintenance program and some street projects. We do a lot of this in-house. Some of them we bid out. But after our staff meeting last Wednesday, at which Matt Amundsen and I led that discussion about having city staff involved, we, as a group, I think it's fair to say, came to the conclusion that that wasn't a very viable option.
So
We're there for part of that, weren't you?
are there any other firms which you could have approached?
I did approach, there were three other firms that I also sent the RFP to, and all three declined to respond. So, and I had been advised by Public Works staff to just send it to 3 to begin with. I had sent it to 6, and we got 3, so.
I think the issue is a lot of these firms have more than enough work to do
Yeah,
already.
I think that's it too.
With all the construction and all the design.
Yeah.
Mark, you mentioned one reason, one rationale for selecting KL Engineering was the flexibility in their pricing. Are there any other reasons that would, for selecting them over the?
Well, I did go through a little bit more. I have more notes than what I went through with the PEDBAC Transit Committee. And I'll mention them here. KL, what Core offers is they have a partnership with Thompson Associates, Alice Thompson, who did wetland delineation and a lot of work in our conservancy. So they called her their environmental partner. Core also was very specific in how they wanted to do their public outreach with charrettes, social media, etc. If you look at the proposal, I actually gave you a copy of KL's, maybe I should have given you both, but KL's outlined a process that they call, it's an informed, let's see, what's the name of it here?
But that's also the lowest cost, right, the KL?
Yeah.
SDIC.
So
Public
the
involvement method.
Yeah, the systematic development of informed consent. You know, so they apparently, this is some nationally recognized approach, which I've heard of before, but have you done that? What do you think of that?
He knows it.
What do you think of that, Leaf? Okay. So, you know, there are, you know, they all recognized the importance of public outreach, public involvement. Core did have their real estate in-house, and they had a higher real estate costs identified. They had comparable experience, their timeline was comparable to Kale's, but the risk of changes to the cost for additional charges, for example, real estate, archaeological, traffic signals, meetings, things like that, traffic signal modifications, I mean, that was identified throughout their proposal as this would be an additional cost. So I was worried that their cost would increase above what they had quoted us, and that was, I think, $285. It was roughly $285. Whereas KL identified the range and said this could be, you know, they identified ways it could be less. And I was happier with that approach with real estate. And I don't know if I answered the rest of your questions.
So this goes up to Highway Q now, right?
Yes, this was for, actually, that's a good point. And I'm sorry, I obviously had some unexpected time off here in the past week, so I'm maybe not quite as prepared as I should be. You know, I have good news for you. The west segment, I was giving you west and east together.
Yeah.
The west segment, if you look on page 10, is the west segment total range is 126 to 173. I'm glad we're having this conversation, obviously. So 126 to 173, the reason I was thinking of both segments is because they would like to design or conceptually design both segments together so that there's a unified quarter. But with this clarification, which is very helpful, obviously, it doesn't sound quite as bad. In other words, comparing the 75,000 that was budgeted was just for the west segment. So an apples to apples comparison is the 75,000, the upper limit of that would be 173, which is obviously a heck of a lot better than 290. So I'm sorry for misleading you.
And it's assumed that we would hire the same firm for the west and the east segment, so
Well,
it's
that would make
coherent,
sense.
yeah.
And the other advantage for KL, and it's in my memo, is they have been selected as the Dane County's design consultant for the Highway M project going around the lake, including the bike path that's being designed through alongside Terrence's property, Bishop's Bay, and the St. Benedict, or whatever that's called now.
Holy Wisdom.
Holy Wisdom.
Yeah.
They're the design consultant for the highway or for the bike?
Both, for the whole project.
Pull up a map and show us what the east and west.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Is it attached?
I don't think it's attached. There's a, I have it on the desktop.
Oh, okay.
And unfortunately, it's just the west side, west. Yes, it's just gonna be the west segment. So this was, Jen, what we're looking at here is the, and for that matter, Wayne, I think you probably haven't seen this before either. On the west side is Old Creek Road, the intersection of Old Creek and Century, the west end of the line, red line. Then it crosses the green line, which is the Pheasant Branch Trail, which of course we all know. The purple lines are showing Branch Street and Allen Boulevard bike facilities. And then the eastern edge of the red line is at the signal at Highland Way near the top of the hill. So that's the west segment. There's an alternative shown. When you go back to Branch Street, there's some dashed lines. That's intended to show the idea of going behind the houses that are located there. That dashed line should actually go 2 more lots east. It should actually, right where Abby's showing where the arrow is, it should actually go there to show the idea of going behind 7 lots, I think it is, maybe only 6 of houses.
That will be west of the Goodwill, so.
Right, between the Goodwill sign and the future, the Goodwill site and the future trailhead project. The reason why we're identifying that as an alternative, and all the respondents acknowledge this, is in case we can't get consensus to locate in the front of the houses, that, you know, because there's concern about loss of some of their front yard.
This would be different than the sidewalk.
The whole idea is to have a 10-foot wide paved path, like what we see alongside Deming Way by.
So sidewalk and bike path would be the same?
Yes.
facility, okay.
In front of
And-
Hertz Donuts,
And this will be
Yeah.
asphalt,
same idea, yes.
Yeah, you can bike to Hertz Donuts.
yes.
And to the ice cream shop.
So,
And the ice cream,
Chocolate shop.
and Culver's. You
And
can
the
park-
the other place is Park Street, Park Lawn by the pool. There we have a path as well.
Yeah.
And
so this is a question for Dan. Dan, were you thinking of in 2019 doing the west part, or you were thinking doing the whole thing?
Well, originally, we talked about 2019 doing the west part. So,
Okay.
you know, I don't know that the cost to do this would be extreme, I would think, but one of the things I was in favor of with this, and Mark and I spoke, was that they can do the design and get it ready, and we can do construction in 2019.
For the west?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think the other firms could do that too, but this is the lowest firm, the costs, the lowest cost, I mean, and it caps, you know, it acknowledges that real estate costs will vary, but here's what you know, they can reduce it. There's this range identified, and I think we're in better shape going with that than.
So if the regional thinking was the west part, so that's what you want to focus on?
Oh, yeah, that has never changed. It's always been the
Okay.
focus. And the reason for that is because between Allen Boulevard and Highland Way, that bridge over the creek is the only connection between the northeast part of the city and the rest of the community. The only other connection is in the Conservancy, and that's a gravel path that is not all season and all, you know, all purpose.
Okay, yes, Kurt, you have a question.
No, I was just gonna say, we're probably ready to make a motion, but if Dan wants to make it, since he's on the bike pad committee, that,
Okay. I make a motion that we increase the additional funding for the design for the, and Mark, are we gonna wanna have them do the whole design for the
Well,
continuity?
I
think maybe that would make the most sense.
yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, and I don't have that broken down. I can certainly work with them to identify that. Well, what they're showing right now is that the upper end is the 296,000. So if you wanted to, that could be your motion, or if you just want to focus on the west
Go up
side.
to 296.
So,
Not to exceed 296.
Yeah.
I should, well, that's actually debatable. Abby raised a very good point that we should talk about too. The western segment at Highland Way is about the half-mile limit beyond the TID. You know, we can spend within half a mile of the TID district. However, Mike Davis has concluded that he thinks the case could be made to go beyond that. It's just, we don't have that, we haven't checked with our attorney about that. So, but I'm glad she brought that
So
up.
you want to stick to that west part then?
I think at this
Until you
point,
get more
Let's
information?
go up
That
to
might-
296.
Let's make a motion that we increase the funding for the Northeast Commuter Path up to 296.
For design. Second.
Okay, any questions?
I just want to make sure I understand. So on page 10, the first green line says total design cost, and at the bottom,
It's 205.
yep,
well, there's
But
the design.
it could go up to, so you want to put a range then, right?
Yeah, go up to 296, because that could include real estate services. Yeah.
Right.
okay.
I think Jen, what I did is I came up with that range. If you take the 153, which is it's not a range, that's the design cost. The real estate is where the range is. So if you add the two lowest real estate numbers for west and east, that came up, that should equal 205,000. Doing my math in my head here quickly, that's right. And then the upper range is taking the two upper numbers, obviously.
So you want to make sure that you have all this added for the city council meeting then?
Yeah, right. And by the advantage of doing it this way instead of just the west segment is then, it's more efficient to do the design in one fell swoop, but they would focus on the timing and construction for 2019 for the west segment.
I think it may be a good idea at some stage to see how much it actually would cost to build it as well. If you end up like what Kurt is saying, $2 to $3 million, then
If it's gonna cost that, I will be absolutely stunned. I would hope it wouldn't even, well, I'm not even gonna speculate, given the numbers are
Yeah,
spiking,
don't
but
do that.
I'm not gonna, it might be quoted by the certain papers.
so is there any way to, is there some way to find out, at least some approximate?
Well, we'll find that out
Probably
with
not
this
until you do the
design.
design work.
Yeah, when they do the design work. Originally, we got a grant for this, just for background. We did get a grant for $268,000
Yeah.
through the Federal Transportation Alternatives Program.
Mhm.
But we were advised by various sources, including consulting firms, but also Dane County staff, that it wasn't going to be worthwhile to keep the grant because the federal process requires all this I dotting and T crossing that would have increased the project cost beyond what there was a good chance it would have increased it beyond what we could do without having to go through all those contortions to comply with their standards. And I'm not saying that they're wrong, it's just that was what the terms of the federal grant was. But, of course, here we are ending up with a very expensive design project anyway. I think, as Kurt mentioned, there's a lot of work out there that consulting firms are probably not as hungry for work as.
So if you do a design work, it's come sitting there for a couple of years, so would that be still useful, or you will have to update it? I mean, we will do the west part in 19, and then the east part, if it is, we don't
It's
get
cost
to it.
prohibitive, or if TIF can't be used, then that would delay that part of the project, right? But the design would be, I think almost everything in the design would remain current another year or two. I don't know what would change, unless federal, what's that? No, and unless, there were changes in requirements for, I mean, I don't know what would change.
Okay, so your homework is you will find out whether or not TIF can fund the east part of it, number one.
Right.
And then number two, get the
Pretty sure TIF
figures.
can fund the design work.
The question is, can it go for the eastern?
And the design
part,
work
which
go
is-
beyond the 1.5 mile.
Right. And that's something that Mike, when I talked with him a week ago or so, he was thinking it could and that he could make a case for that, but we don't have that opinion yet from.
And then you will add up these values, and the third will be to find out that, if we do go through the planning process, let's say if it doesn't get done in 19 or 20, that it will be still useful, that you don't have to redo it again. For example, we were doing that storm sewer stuff with this Terrence property, and that's getting updated, and there's additional cost there now. So I don't know how long.
I'm not sure what the project is that you're referring to, the storm sewer work for what?
No, there was the utility district, so.
Oh, the utility district for
Yeah.
Community Bishop's Bay?
That's all
I
getting
see.
updated and costing extra money, so.
Hey.
Okay, anyway, it's good to have that information, so.
One question, Mark, along that east stretch, is that, the work that's going on right now, is that optic cable they're laying along that sidewalk, or what's going on there?
I am not aware of any work going up there. I haven't noticed any. Where is this happening?
I think it's optic.
Yeah, along Century Avenue, along this, they're pulling some sort of cable underneath that sidewalk, yeah.
I know there was a
Parkway there.
utility box was removed and replaced with some at-grade facility in front of, or near CVS, or near the National Bank, but I don't know anything east of there. Sorry, I haven't.
Are you talking about there's a Goodwill stuff happening there?
No.
No, in the east way, in East Mahilin.
It's in the parkway, the area between the sidewalk and the curb, all the way from near Allen Boulevard
Up the hill.
up to Q, and it looks like it even turns going up Q, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Isn't that fiber for all your new residents? Could be, I mean, it could be.
Okay, all right, so the motion has been made. Any more questions related to the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes, so. The next item is number 10. This is the research on methods for public notification in other cities, and Abby or her staff did a great job, so there's a table there, so it looks like city has been doing pretty good.
Yeah, I had no idea what to expect looking into how we compare to other cities, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that, we're, in general, we're doing mailings at a greater distance than our peer communities, with the exception of Fitchburg. Although we have a big box ordinance that requires 3,000 feet for a big box store. All cities are required to do the Class 2 notice in the newspaper. We don't have by policy, but we encourage a meeting with the neighborhood for all rezonings. We include our public hearing notice on the main page of our city website, and we were the only community that did that. And then we use our Notify Me email to specifically note public hearing notices in addition to the Plan Commission agendas, where most other communities were sending out their Plan Commission agenda via a listserv, but they weren't specifically doing it in addition for public hearings, so that was good to see. The one thing where, we've kind of been talking, and I for one think that this is a very effective method of getting the word out about a project, is to post a sign on the
Yes.
property. They're very noticeable. And for people who drive by, on their way to work or who live nearby, they're likely to see it. My concern with the idea was, do we have the staff to handle going out and doing the signs, and how does it work in the winter? But I was pleased to learn from Mark Roffers, who's a member of our ZBA. He brought me in some. Oh, thank you, Mark Wolford. Sorry.
Different Mark.
Different Mark. He brought me in a sheet of information that the city of Madison provides to applicants for rezoning, which essentially requires them to post it on the property. And so, if we were to go this route, we would print them here in-house. We would require them to fill it out, post it. If it's not posted in time, that would delay the hearing. And then we would be able to provide requirements. We'd probably copy something similar to what the city of Madison is doing, because it seems to be working well for where they can and cannot post the sign. We'd probably need to increase our fees a little bit if we were to go this route to cover the cost of, printing a sign. So I don't know what that, 30 or 40 bucks, something like that. The other idea that we thought might be worth considering is a postcard rather than a letter in an envelope. The reason being, one, we might save a little bit of postage on mailing a postcard, but two, we had at least one person who told us that they don't open mail from the city, they just recycle it. So we thought, well, if it's on a postcard and they have to look at it, maybe, someone is more likely to.
And also cheaper, so.
But they're blaming us for not.
I know. Yeah. Well, and the other thing we talked about doing, Abby, was maybe adding a sentence. I think the county does this. You're getting this notice because you're within a certain distance, but if you know other people in your neighborhood or in general that would be interested, please share it and pass it on. Because we're not trying to hide anything. We want
Right.
people to know about it. And so maybe that would be an encouragement if we.
Good to know that our practices, despite criticism, are largely in line with many of the other cities. But every other city I've ever lived in or been a zoning board member in, if put a giant
Yellow
sign or orange
Yeah,
sign,
yeah.
For a variance too?
or for variances, for conditional use permits, for anything, any zoning.
So
any
that's a
zoning
good
issue.
idea then.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then,
Oh,
do
for
we want to
variances, yeah.
send this to LNO
Notice
or
them.
just for that, put you one recommendation?
Or would you want to make the recommendation to the council and then have them send it to, or what do you
okay.
think? I don't know. What's
Yeah.
the protocol?
Can I would make a recommendation, a motion that we recommend to council to add required sign posting for rezoning requests, conditional use permit applications, and variance requests with a standard similar to that in Madison.
Zoning variance requests?
Zoning. I mean, I was on a zoning board in another city, and you always had to put a sign up on the property for a variance request too.
But like we have a sign variance process too, which goes to the plan commission. I would think zoning would suffice.
Yeah.
But,
right.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Anything that requires a public hearing, that's a good idea.
I think that's a good idea. Anything which requires public hearing, yes.
Yeah, so that would be, a sign variance doesn't require a public hearing, because that's an SIP modification. A variance at the ZHB, or the ZBA, all these acronyms, a conditional use permit and a rezoning,
That covers it.
I think that covers most of it.
And Abby, is it all right if they make the motion, given what's on the agenda? That's probably okay, right? Research
The-
on methods.
Posted?
It
Posted
just
as
says
research. Provide, recommendation, provide input to staff, so.
it's- Yeah.
But
Maybe,
but the agenda itself says research on methods for, so I didn't know if that gave us enough.
Well, you're giving direction on what to do with that research. How
Well,
about
that's
that?
true. You could
Yeah.
take it to the council.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are
Direct
just
to
sending
council.
to the council, so that's okay.
There you go.
I would also like to suggest that we add requiring a notification to the alder and the neighborhood association.
Yeah.
And we do try to send it to or ask the applicant to go talk to the alder and then have a neighborhood meeting, like Gabby said. That we also do, I just noticed one today, we do try to send it to neighborhood association if we know about it, if we have it on record, or if they're owning property within the area, but that's a good idea too.
As practice, I think we are doing that, but to make that a checklist.
To make it part of an
right?
ordinance,
Checklist,
yeah.
And
That's
on
what
the
Madison
postcard,
does.
on the postcard idea, one thought would be, I think if it was a different color, it would actually call attention to it as well, rather than just white.
Yeah, but what if somebody doesn't like blue and then?
I just think that's funny, because I'm more likely to open a letter that looks official than I would be, like, even a postcard of something, I'd be like.
So many letters now that are sent urgent, you must open this. and
Right,
then
yeah.
then
But then
you're
you see what
scanned.
it's from, and if it's City of Middleton, you know, be like.
The outside of the envelope could say, notice of
Rezoning. or
Rezoning
notice of
request.
Public
I
hearing
don't-
or something.
How about your property value could go down and then?
No, because you don't know that.
Okay, so we need a second to this, or do we have a second?
With the friendly amendment of notification to Alder and Neighborhood
Yes,
Association.
Yes, need a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further questions now?
Can I just say, the way
Yes.
I've written it is that, moved by Paulson, second by Furter, to send this to the Common Council, to add the requirements as recommended by or as laid out by the staff,
Okay.
including notification of the Alder and Neighborhood Association.
And posting of sign
And
for
posting of signs, yeah.
rezoning CUPs and variances for the ZBA.
Actually, I like that. That's a good way of putting it.
They're always yellow, aren't they? So.
Yeah.
Orange.
Kind of an orangish gold.
Every city I've lived in, they're big orange signs. It's like the liquor license request, right?
Okay,
They're Posted.
But what if then a
Right, the
developer
liquor
regulates
notice,
the
public hearing
signs?
is always orange,
All
right?
right, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. We are on to number 11.
Yep,
Do you
so,
want to take it?
so as you all know, the city is in the process of adding left turn lanes, and doing some design work for the Parmenter and University intersection. And so we've been planning for this for quite some time. We are in the process of acquiring property on the north side of the Parmenter and University intersection, and we've hired Strand to design the intersection. As the discussions have proceeded, our staff has noted that we feel that the intersection design should include some sort of gateway feature that calls attention to the fact that this is the entrance to downtown Middleton. We've heard and we've discussed this for a long time, that if you talk to somebody who isn't that familiar with Middleton and you say, we're in downtown Middleton, a lot of times the response we get is, Middleton has a downtown. A lot of people in Madison don't know. They don't know that it exists. And, part of the problem is that the Beltline, the signage when you come from Madison on the Beltline, you don't really get a nice sign that says downtown Middleton this way. And we worked on that, I think probably about 5 or 6 years ago, to try to see if we could get signage placed on the Beltline like they have for Spring Green, to, get people into our downtown. So, the idea here is that, this would mark the most prominent entrance to downtown Middleton. It would be timed well with the development of the downtown plaza, which is expected to be constructed next year. And it would help to express the identity of Middleton. It would be a complement to the more traditional, like, welcome to and wayfinding signs in the city. This would be more an iconic piece that might be like a sculpture or, some type of artwork. And it would likely need to be located at the northwest and southeast corners of the intersection. So currently the former gas station property and the bank property. The reason being, that's where we have the additional right-of-way, or eventually will have the additional right-of-way available to locate something. We talked about the idea of bridging the highway, and that's, Public Works has completely shot that idea down. That is not happening. So we're thinking like 2 sculptural pieces, gateway features. I don't know, what they will end up being designed to be. This is consistent with the city adopted plan, which is the master plan for public art and design, which has a goal to locate gateway features at major intersections in the city, and it calls out the the whole entire Parmenter corridor as the spine of public art through the city. Separately, our Public Arts Committee is working on fundraising for sculpture for the Parmenter roundabout. So, we had our TIF team, our TIF consultants put together a proposal for us. The cost for the work would be $18,500 for initial design, with final construction documents at a cost not to exceed $19,000. These, if we were to go this route, they would come up with 3 concepts, and they would give us a cost estimate for constructing the concept. Our goal would be to have a design ready in time so that it could be included in the bid package for the intersection improvements, and they can be done hand in hand. Unfortunately, again, apologies for craziness, but the scope of work was handed out tonight. This I thought was included in the packet, and then we received another document, and that document replaced this document. So this scope of work should have been included in your packet. So our recommendation is, discussion. We wanted to hear your thoughts on whether you like the idea of having some sort of gateway feature here at this intersection. And if you do, if you like the idea of using our TIF consultants to do the design work for us.
Well, I can start with this. So what do you think, 38,000 is just for the design and construction paper. So what do you think it will end up actually the total cost? You're talking about well over $100,000, right?
I wouldn't be surprised, given that the cost of the out-of-the-shell roundabout sculpture now has increased to about $84,000, and that's for a 14-foot tall stainless steel and dichroic glass sculpture. So that's one sculptural piece. But again, we don't know what the design looks like, so I think we could give the designers the feedback that, we would like them to stay within this overall budget, or we could, negotiate with them on this scope. We could consider alternatives. We like working with Vanderwall and Associates a lot. One of the benefits of having them under contract to do this kind of work for the city, for TIF consulting, is that, they're willing to kind of drop every other project that they have going on because we're a major client for them, and they're willing to turn projects around quickly to make their full expertise of their staff available to us at the drop of a hat. We would like to, like I said, have the design ready to go in time for the bidding. And so that would be one benefit of working with Vanderwall on the project.
Yeah, that's exactly the reason why I don't like it, because I think if we want to go with this, we should really have a request for proposals, not just one person doing it. But what I would really like is, you remember that when the Starbucks did their project? So we asked actually the students, and was it MATC or the high school students? And we had how many responses? Over 140 or some responses. So if we really want this to be a Middleton project, something defining it, so we need to involve, the citizens, we need to involve the students, we can involve MATC or other artists. But I don't really think that I want to give it to Vanderwall. And if we want to give it to the professional firm, number one, I don't know whether we really want it or whether we need it. So that's because we have welcome signs that already set up at points where the downtown is. And we have that gateway feature, which we are already working on raising for money for the past several years. So I would be probably more interested getting the public input. Are they interested? This, a lot of people are still fuming when the city spent $50 or $55,000 just for getting the Middleton sign. You know, they changed Middleton sign about 8 or 9 years ago. So we had spent about $50,000 on that one. So I know it's a TIF money. It's,
Which sign is that?
Yeah, which sign?
Oh, this is the Middleton logo.
Oh, that was probably 15 years ago, wasn't it? I mean, it was a while ago.
More than
The
12.
logo. Yeah, it was more than.
Yeah, so people are still, you know, remember
Really,
this,
that's
so
interesting.
in any case, so.
This Gateway proposed budget does have some public input sessions.
Well, this is, once you have already decided, I mean, do we really even want it? So, but you probably want the public input first rather than later. So, yes, Leif, you have some.
I think, well, at least for me, I need to back up a little bit, because I'm not sure where all the entrances are to Middleton, and where we need all welcoming stuff here in Middleton. I mean, you know, you talked about the roundabout sculpture. I know we bought some land close to that roundabout, thinking that was gonna be a main entryway to Middleton. I understand where it'd be nice to have some kind of acknowledgement of entry to downtown Middleton. Got it. But maybe there needs to be a little bit more comprehensiveness put to this as opposed to where all of this, so it all works together, much like our trail signage, where we have signage throughout Middleton and it's pretty uniform and blah, blah, blah. I don't say the entrance concepts have to be uniform or anything like that, but just kind of, again, piecemealing this all together, I'm kind of like, let's come up with an overall concept and plan for how we want to greet our guests into this community. So I'm just thinking we need to back up a little bit. We got an opportunity, I understand that too.
And I sort of agree that we need a holistic plan, not just for one.
And surely it's part of the city downtown plan, you know, as to where those points should be.
Well, it is in the master plan for public art and design. This location is called out for a unique gateway feature. So it's not, I guess the goal behind that plan, which now is probably 8 or 9 years old. The goal for that plan was to have these gateway features actually be unique rather than, include like the city logo and the city
signage,
colors and that each one would be unique and would, in some way speak to like Middleton's history or culture, but they would be a unique piece designed for the site specific for Middleton. And I guess, Gurdeep, to your point, I loved the Starbucks project, and I think that project turned out very well. But I don't think we want a student designing something that's going to be a built structure at a major intersection in the city. I would really be concerned about public safety with something like that, and also longevity of materials and things like that.
Well, they just come up with a concept and later, we can still hire a firm. We got a lot of artists in Middleton too. I mean,
Oh, right, yeah.
see how many you have even on the art committee. And it's not what you had in the art plan. That should go to the art committee before it.
But this is not designing the artwork, this is designing the location and concept, right, that involves, I mean, I would not want a student artist, I would want someone trained at least as a landscape architect, as all the designers in Vanderwall are. Someone who understands context and site analysis and right of way and all those flows.
Yeah, I think my question is, let's get the citizen input. Do we want it? Number one to begin with, and number two, then if we really want it, if we want a professional firm, let's have a request for proposals. And I actually would want to involve the artist in Middleton. I guess we got great artists here, like even on your committee, and let's see what they think, so.
think also, why is that the gateway, that point?
Pardon me?
No? Why
gateway
is-
to
Why
downtown.
is that intersection?
Because the master plan for art identified it as a gateway to downtown, right?
But so Cuyahoga Court is outside the gateway?
No, I mean, I think Cayuga Court has some nice features as well, but the downtown Middleton is actually identified as, you know, what you think of as the historic core, but also the Parmenter corridor up to the roundabout. And so, you know, part of the goal here is to kind of try to make the connection between what people typically think of as downtown and what is actually identified by city plans, the Downtown Business Association, and other venues as being the downtown.
And I think one of the reasons that came up with this, and Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, is because this project that we're doing, the reason that we bought property in that location is then it will facilitate left turn lanes, or left turns, and dedicated left turns. That will help make it, this is the way into the downtown. Right now, I wouldn't want to try to turn left there, you know, into our downtown at certain times. I don't.
Not on Parmenter.
Not on Parmenter, but this would.
Off of University.
The project itself, yeah, off University.
I turn left at,
Facilitate that.
No, we all agree on those left lanes. I mean, everybody agrees that what we are doing and improving that intersection is good.
Mm-hmm.
But just, you know, sticking these things in there, sticking the, you know, the tip with $100,000 and just sticking with this one firm, that's absolutely not acceptable, so.
I just want to call attention to the fact that I don't appreciate you saying we would just stick it here, because this is
Right.
in a city-adopted plan.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's fine, but you
Whether
also.
if you don't want to go with what is in the city-adopted plan, that's fine, but I just don't like the implication
Right.
that it was just an idea to just plop it here, because this is in a master plan for public art and design for the city.
That was adopted.
But you also said that it's up to, you know, the downtown is starting from that roundabout. I mean, you just said that. So, you did say that, you know.
That's identified on the
Yeah,
plan.
That's part of
identified in-
downtown,
Identified
yeah.
in the plan.
Yep.
So it is all part of it, so.
But the amount of cars on University Avenue is probably 10 times greater than the roundabout
Yeah.
portion of it, so.
Well, we
That's
can,
not
I mean, we can talk about it, we can think.
I
about it.
move to
We-
recommend to the council up to $18,500 from tax increment District Number 3 for design work from Vanderwall and Associates, as outlined in staff comments.
Do we have a second? Okay, so the motion is dead. So do we need to do anything more? Okay, well, you got the input, so,
No gateway feature at Parmenter University. We got it.
okay, all those in favor?
There is some more, yes.
Wait, I don't think we said no gateway feature.
Right, it should go out, it should be an RFP that goes out.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if you change it and bring it as a RFP or bring citizens' input, well, we may reconsider it, so.
Well, I don't want to spend a lot of work developing an
Right.
RFP if you still won't support it. I would be
Pretty-
happy
yeah.
to do the work if there's interest from the plan
Right.
commission, but I don't want to spend a lot of time developing an RFP in process if there's not interest
Well,
in the
I want to get
project.
first the taxpayer citizens' input. So I
But
think
how-
that's, well, let's find a way to do it, so.
Abby, I just want to clarify, in terms of the cost, this is saying that it's just the concept work for 18.5, and then the construction documents would be another up to 19,000, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So it'd be 37.5 plus whatever the construction cost would be.
That's true, yes.
You're right.
It could be anywhere $100,000 to $200,000, so. Okay, motion to adjourn. Need a second. Okay, we are adjourned.